Chapter 1014. You're courting death, the pirate sneered. In a battle between cultivators, close-quarters combat was the most taboo. The prerequisite was that one was facing an elite or an opponent of equal strength. Not to mention against an elite, charging into close-quarters combat was simply courting death. If their strength was equal, close-quarters combat was incredibly dangerous, and victory or even death could be decided at any moment. However, on the other hand, if one was superior in strength, close-quarters combat was definitely the fastest way to end the battle. This brat's cultivation level was far inferior to his, so charging forward would be equivalent to courting death. Could it be that any random opponent he encountered was a 5-star genius? Even if it was a 5-star genius, their strength would at most be on par with his. The pirate brandished his saber and attacked, wanting to finish off his opponent in the shortest time possible. "I'll send you on your way in 10 moves, Ling Han said with a smile. Pooh! The pirate almost spluttered. This should have been his line. A mere cultivator in the early stage of the medium extreme actually dared to boast that he would finish him off in 10 moves. Where did this courage come from? Brat, die. He brandished his saber even more urgently, and divine patterns appeared on the blade as if they had come to life. This wasn't because his saber was a god tool, but rather because his martial art intent had filled the blade during the battle, and this was the result of this transformation. It was equivalent to turning the saber into a part of his body. Thus, although it didn't have the might of a god tool, it was still no small matter. Wang, the saber exuded a black radiance, and its destructive power was astonishing. The light shot out and slashed the deck, leaving a deep mark. Ling Han's figure leaped, and the divine patterns of gravity continuously affected the pirate. Added with the impact of the 7-kill subduing soul technique, the pirate couldn't even use half of his full battle prowess. Defeating an opponent didn't necessarily require one's battle prowess to surpass the opponent's. Weakening the opponent's strength could also achieve one's goal. They exchanged blows, and in an instant, they had already exchanged 9 moves. The pirate no longer dared to underestimate Ling Han, but saying that he wanted to finish him off in 10 moves was really a joke. "I still have one more move. You want to kill me? Aren't you dreaming?" Ling Han suddenly charged forward, looking like he wanted to perish together with the pirate. The pirate was startled at first, but then he sneered. He was confident that he could kill Ling Han first. Then, as long as Ling Han died, the effects he had received would completely disappear, and he would recover his full battle prowess. At this time, even if Ling Han's attack came again, would it be able to harm him? What an idiot! Did he think he was invincible just because he could affect me? He swung his saber and chopped down at Ling Han's head. Unfortunately, the people in the imperial capital were not here. Otherwise, there would definitely be people who would kindly advise him not to underestimate Ling Han's physique. Otherwise, he would be seeking his own death. Boom! The saber slashed down, and sure enough, it struck Ling Han's head first. However, what was shocking was that, Wang, the saber trembled and actually bounced back. Puff the pirate's eyes almost popped out. This scene was really beyond his expectations. Only now did he understand why Ling Han had the confidence to do so. His physique was simply inhuman. Oh no! He immediately exclaimed in his mind, but it was already too late to change his move now. In the first place, he had planned to kill Ling Han first. Then, the power of the latter's dying counterattack would definitely be greatly reduced, and there would be no danger to him at all. But now, he felt a pain in his chest, and then all the power in his body rapidly faded. 10th move. Ling Han's voice sounded in his ears, but it was so far away that it seemed like it was on the horizon. Before he could finish his thought, he had already lost all consciousness. Ling Han drew his sword back. The divine blade was not stained with blood, and was as bright as a mirror. He put the corpse of this pirate into his spatial spirit tool, and then charged towards where Shui Yanyu was, helping her defeat the enemy. The two of them were already well coordinated. One used the 7-kill subduing soul technique to paralyze the enemy, and the other took advantage of the opportunity to harvest. As long as their cultivation level was below the high extreme, they would be able to kill them with a single move. However, there were only 60 pirates, and after they joined forces and killed a dozen or so, there were naturally many pirates who targeted them. Xiao, another powerful pirate, leaped out, the image of 4 mountains and rivers impressively behind him. Consummate level? Thankfully, the 4th river had just formed, and was obviously a size smaller. It should only be the late stage of the consummate level, and not the peak stage. Even so, this kind of strength was still enough to crush Ling Han and Shui Yanyu. Even Ling Han was 10 sub-minor levels weaker than the other party. Unless he was a 10-star genius, there was no way he could make up for this kind of gap. But 5-star geniuses were already legendary, so where would a 10-star genius come from? Die. The pirate attacked. He was a bald man with a shiny head, and as soon as he attacked, he threw out a string of beads. But upon closer inspection, each of the beads was actually a human head, just that they were many times smaller. Ling Han could be sure that these skulls belonged to humans, and at least mountain river tier beings. They had been tempered by the other party using a secret technique, and that was why they had become so small. As the string of beads waved, the skulls lit up. Pooh! They actually spat out bursts of black chi, which turned into black swords that slashed towards Ling Han. So fast. Ling Han only had time to shield his face with his arms, and these swords had already reached him. Pooh, piu, 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 they all pierced through his clothes and flesh, and nailed into his body. Thankfully, Ling Han's godly bones were extremely tough, and didn't break in a single strike. The consummate level was the consummate level, after all, really too terrifying. Ling Han sighed ruefully, but didn't know that the Baldy was even more shocked. He was a whole 10 sub-minor levels higher than Ling Han, and theoretically, he could kill Ling Han with a single strike. However, he had actually only caused some light injuries, which was really unacceptable. Humph. With a thought, Ling Han activated the divine patterns of flame, and the swords nailed into his arm were instantly refined into dust. He channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and the wound instantly healed. The Baldy was dumbfounded, and 10,000 curses galloped through his mind. This kind of physique, this kind of recovery ability, if it could be maintained indefinitely, then unless he insta-killed Ling Han, who could outlast him? Damn it, how could there be such a freak? The Baldy took a deep breath. Come, he definitely had to get serious. He had to unleash a powerful move and kill Ling Han with a single strike, or at least severely injure him. Otherwise, he would be able to easily recover, and there would be no way to kill him. He fiddled with the string of beads, and said, "My Buddha is merciful, help all living beings cross the sea of bitterness." When, there was actually a ring of golden light emitting from his body, looking incredibly divine. He was obviously a murderous demon, but he actually had such a dignified appearance. "Foolish commoner, I'll be the one to redeem you," Baldy shouted and tossed the string of beads into the air. When, the string of beads immediately grew in size, and each head was the size of a normal human head. A quick count revealed that there were exactly 360 heads. Eternal Heaven Cycle Formation, kill. Hung, every head spat out a black light that shot towards Ling Han. Reading on a phone was even more refreshing. Chapter 10:16. So what if you know? You still have to die. Zhou Gaoyang sneered, and slashed back with his sword. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Brother, you really shouldn't have dragged innocent people into this." "Oh, could it be that you want to stand up for them?" Zhou Gaoyang slashed again and again, each strike sharp, and shone with a frightening divine light. His sword techniques were extremely simple, and were aimed at Ling Han's vitals, abandoning all finesse. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "I don't have that much free time, but someone has long wanted to smash you into pieces." "Oh, who is it?" Zhou Gaoyang said, but his sword did not slow down at all. "It's me." With a cold snort, Yang Tiecheng's figure appeared. His 3-meter-tall body exuded a frightening aura, and his face was livid, filled with killing intent. Zhou Gaoyang instantly had goosebumps all over his body. He felt a chill rise from the bottom of his heart, and instantly spread to his limbs. There was an entire minor tier between him and Yang Taicheng, and he was only an experienced assassin, not a genius who could challenge those of a higher tier. On the other hand, Yang Taicheng was a 2-star genius. In other words, there was a whole 6 sub-minor tiers of battle prowess between the two of them. This was an absolute suppression. He was not Ling Han, whose physique was strong. Facing an elite like Yang Taicheng, it was very likely that he would be killed within 10 moves. Yang Taicheng, die. The 3 elites of the pirates also charged over. Yang Taicheng only used one hand to block them as he stared coldly at Zhou Gaoyang, and said, "What else do you have to say?" Zhou Gaoyang did not speak. Suddenly, he became one with his sword, and he directly flew out. He did not attack Yang Taicheng, nor did he want to die with Ling Han. Instead, he directly dove towards the surface of the sea. Obviously, he wanted to escape to the bottom of the sea. Although the gravity here was frighteningly strong, and if one went down, they would basically sink to the bottom, and would have to walk step by step like a normal person, no matter how long it took, they would definitely be able to walk out of the sea in 8 to 10 years. It was better than fighting Yang Taicheng and losing their lives, right? You want to leave? Yang Taicheng smirked coldly. His other hand stretched out, grabbing toward Zhou Gaoyang. This strike was enough to display the terrifying strength of a peak paragon. The black hand stretched out endlessly, actually turning into a small mountain. More than 10 divine runes flickered, emitting a soul-stirring aura. This hand was too big, and it instantly covered the entire ship, blocking Zhou Gaoyang's path. Sky-piercing sword. Zhou Gaoyang shouted. His body suddenly sped up, and he and his sword became one, colliding with the big hand. Puff! The sword light flashed like a rain of light, flashing explosively in the sky. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and saw that Zhou Gaoyang had actually pierced a hole through that large hand. Zhou Gaoyang flew out, but his sword light had become incredibly dim. Obviously, he had paid a considerable price for this strike. Can you escape? Yang Taicheng smirked coldly. With a wave of his hand, he once again gave chase. Ah! Zhou Gaoyang screamed in agony. He was caught by the large hand, and his bones instantly creaked, causing him to scream in pain involuntarily. The difference in strength was really too obvious. With the suppression of 6 sub-minor levels, added with the fact that Zhou Gaoyang had no fighting spirit at all, and only wanted to escape, he was even more easily captured by Yang Taicheng. Die! The 3 pirate elites attacked repeatedly. Peng, peng, peng. Their attacks fell like raindrops. Yang Taicheng only used a single hand to parry, so he naturally could not completely nullify the attacks. He was struck by a few blows, but his physique was also relatively astonishing. Only a trickle of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Under the combined attacks of 3 great elites, he was actually still able to capture a quasi-elite at the peak stage of the high extreme alive. This kind of strength was really incredibly shocking. Spare me. Zhou Gaoyang immediately begged for mercy. I didn't kill him, I really didn't kill him. Pooh! How could Yang Taicheng believe him? His right hand tightened, and Zhou Gaoyang was forcefully crushed, turning into a rain of blood. He humphed, and released his right hand. That large hand slowly disappeared. Endless pirates, let me send you all to hell today. His killing intent had been aroused, and his 3-meter-tall figure was like a demon lord, exuding a powerful deterrent force. Die, die, die. The pirates similarly did not fear a battle. Kaka, brat, now it's just us again, die. The bald man attacked again, attacking Ling Han. Ling Han met him head-on. As long as the bald man did not use a powerful technique, he could completely withstand the other's attacks with his physique. At most, he would be slightly wounded, and the indestructible Heaven's Scroll would instantly heal him. In terms of battle prowess, he was currently only at the level of 5 or 6 stars, but in terms of endurance, he was definitely at the level of a freakish 10 stars. Even elites at the consummate level could not kill him. There was practically no justice in this world. Ling Han felt that it was a bit of a pity. Being harassed by this bald man, he could not help Shui Yanyu kill the pirates. Then, he would do it himself. Ling Han continued to use the 7-kill subduing soul technique, and every strike was accurate. Even if a cultivator at the peak stage of the medium extreme was hit by this technique, he would also explode with a single punch, and draw them into his spatial spirit tool. This caused the bald man to howl in fury. Under his pursuit, Ling Han actually still had the strength to kill others. This was completely a great humiliation to him. On one hand, the weak pirates were being eliminated, and on the other hand, the crew was also being slaughtered. This almost drove Yang Taiching crazy, and he soared into the sky in fury. His 3-meter-tall figure actually expanded once again, transforming into a 6-meter-tall giant. His clothes were torn apart, and only a pair of underpants covered that important part. There were 9 almost circular seals on his body, and they were currently flashing, causing his power to increase by another level. 9 seal divine patterns, a few elites among the pirates exclaimed in shock. The secret technique of the Yang clan, sacrificing a certain amount of lifespan as the price to increase battle prowess by 1 star. In the first place, Yang Taiching was already strong enough, and now that his battle prowess had increased by another star, there was definitely no one that could block him head-on. After all, this was at the price of sacrificing lifespan. For living beings, what was more precious than lifespan? All of you, die. Yang Taiching displayed his invincible might, fully displaying the demeanor of an elite. Ling Han was also astonished. If he clashed head-on with Yang Taiching, it was very possible that all of his internal organs would explode in less than 10 moves. If it was 100 moves, even his godly bones might be completely shattered. After all, he was at the peak stage of the consummate level, and now he had even reached 3 stars of battle prowess. Following Yang Taiching's display of might, the pirates instantly fell into a disadvantageous position because Lu Ying and the others had also begun to display their true battle prowess. However, in Ling Han's opinion, the most eye-catching person on the scene was definitely not Lu Ying and the other consummate-level elites, nor was it the giant Yang Taiching. Instead, it was Fu Tian, that young man who had only appeared to be 16 or 17 years old. This guy was practically a barbarian. His cultivation level was only at the peak stage of the low extreme, but his battle prowess was extremely powerful. He did not need any weapons at all, and merely used every part of his body to display extraordinary effects. Ling Han had directly bitten off his opponent's nose. Chapter 1017. When cultivators fought, they usually used their hands, feet, or weapons. Probably only an extremely small number of people would cultivate strange techniques like the Iron Head technique. However, if one used their mouth as a weapon, apart from Hunyo in the past, it was probably this youth. Fu Tian's battle style was practically a copy of Hunyo's, but his performance was even crueler. His hands seemed to be forged from metal and stone, and could easily tear through his opponent's defenses, rip open their stomachs, and bite their throats. In any case, it was fine as long as he could injure or kill his opponent. He displayed his unique characteristics to the fullest. This was the result of countless battles. This person should have experienced who knew how many battles like this, and it had already become second nature to him. Once he started fighting, his body would naturally move like this. Where on earth did this youth come from? The pirates couldn't hold on any longer. Previously, 60 people had boarded the ship, and now there were actually less than 20 alive. Their losses could be said to be extremely heavy. More importantly, they still couldn't take down this ship. Not a single one can escape. Yang Taiching humphed coldly. He unleashed his full battle prowess, continuously killing from the bow to the stern, and from the left to the right, not allowing any pirate a chance to escape. Pang! Just at this moment, the ship suddenly shook, and almost flipped over. The people on the ship all staggered and stopped fighting. What was going on? Not good. Yang Taiching and the other pirates looked into the distance, and expressions of shock appeared on their faces. Something that could cause them to show expressions of fear had to be an extremely grave danger. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and also looked into the distance. He saw at least 100 or so giant snakes swimming over. Every one of them was over 30 meters long, and their bodies were as thick as a well. There were green spots on their bodies. Green-spotted demonic snakes, the crew member exclaimed. These were special demonic beasts of the Star Sea, and they had evolved from demonic snakes. They were demonic beasts that lived in groups, and there would be at least a few hundred adult demonic snakes at the mountain river tier in a nest. Small ships could only flee if they encountered these demonic snakes. Pang! The ship shook again, and actually tilted to the left, about to capsize. Humph! Yang Taiching leaped up, and stomped down on the right side of the ship. Pang! The ship shook violently, and the momentum of its capsizing was instantly stopped. Then, it flipped back. There was an 80% chance that there was a giant snake at the bottom of the boat, trying to overturn the boat. Once a martial artist entered the water region, their strength would be greatly reduced. Demonic beasts that had reached the deity level had developed their intelligence to the point of being able to take on a human form. Naturally, they knew how to maximize their advantage. Ling Han's eyes swept over the surroundings, and he saw that they had already been surrounded by a horde of demonic snakes. They were surrounded by large snakes that were over 30 meters long, and every single one of them was in the mountain river tier. However, he could not be sure of their exact cultivation level. There were also some small snakes that were no more than 3 meters long, lagging far behind. They were only in the Shattering Void tier and Heaven tier. Obviously, they were not qualified to join the battle. They would have to wait for the giant snake to finish the battle before they could come up and devour the martial artist's flesh and blood. Spirit meat was a great tonic for martial artists, but the blood essence of martial artists was also a good thing for demonic beasts. This was especially true for deity-level martial artists, as they were too nutritious for demonic beasts of the Shattering Void tier. These demonic snakes must have smelled the scent of blood in the seawater, which was why they had come out of their nest in order to feast. The situation suddenly became extremely grim. Pang! The boat was still swaying, and the demonic snake below was obviously unwilling to give up. It was determined to overturn the boat. At this moment, no one dared to fight amongst themselves. They all stood at different corners of the boat, and attacked one after another to maintain the boat's stability. If the boat were to overturn, it would be difficult for everyone to escape death. Pang, 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 pang. The boat shook violently, and it was as if someone was striking a gong. Not good, these demonic snakes are going to destroy the boat. Everyone's expression changed. If someone dove into the water, they would see that there were over a dozen giant snakes swimming under the boat, and they were spitting water bombs at the bottom of the boat. These water bombs would explode the moment they came into contact with the bottom of the boat, causing the boat to shake violently. Below the boat, there was a gigantic demonic snake that was 300 meters long. The stripes on its body were a faint silver color. This was the demonic snake king. Its cultivation level had reached the peak stage of the mountain river tier, and there was even a possibility that it could break through to the sun-moon tier. Thus, its stripes had also changed. Just now, it was precisely this snake that was trying to overturn the boat. The boat shook violently, and it was as if a huge wave had appeared on the surface of the sea. Those below the immortal level would definitely be swaying from the shaking, and they would have long since fallen into the sea. However, Ling Han and the others were stuck tightly to the boat like magnets. No matter how much the boat shook, they wouldn't budge. However, everyone's expression became even more solemn, because they all knew that this boat wouldn't be able to hold on for long under such a frenzied attack. "We've wasted a lot of time here," Yang Taiching encouraged everyone. "If we can hold on for 2 days, the next boat will arrive. It's a large boat, and there's a great elite of the sun-moon tier guarding it," Yang Taiching encouraged everyone. If there was a Sun Moon tier elite guarding it, then putting aside the fact that there were only a few hundred demonic snakes here, even if there were thousands or tens of thousands of them, they would still be slaughtered. The problem was, could they hold on for as long as 2 days? The boat is about to break, Fu Tian suddenly said. However, there wasn't a shred of fear on his face. Instead, it was filled with fighting spirit. He was definitely a battle maniac. Caw! True enough, a crisp sound rang out from the boat. That was the keel breaking. Everyone looked at each other, but before they could say anything, there was a boom, and the whole boat suddenly disintegrated, turning into at least a dozen pieces. Stand on the deck of the boat, or else we'll lose our buoyancy, and we'll definitely die if we fight in the water. Yang Taiching shouted loudly. He was the captain, and had to be responsible for all the crew members and guests. Everyone did as he said, and stood on different pieces of the boat. The pirates also stopped fighting. Over 20 people were scattered on 3 pieces of the boat. As for the boat they had ferried here, it had long since been crushed into pieces by the demonic snakes, and could no longer be used. Hong, a large snake burst out of the water, and with a swing of its tail, its thick, long, and powerful tail swept toward a person on a piece of the boat. Very coincidentally, Ling Han was on this piece. Thankfully, there was not only Ling Han on this piece, but also Yang Taicheng. Scram! He clenched his fist, and punched the snake's tail. Peng! The snake's tail actually exploded, turning into a rain of blood that filled the sky. It was also so painful that the giant snake continued to writhe on the surface of the sea, raising angry waves. As expected of Yang Taicheng, so strong. Wife, come closer. Ling Han wielded his sword with his right hand, while his left hand wrapped around Shui Yenyu's slender waist, and said, "Today, it's possible that we'll become a pair of lovebirds that share the same fate. You still haven't said a single word of love to me, so you won't let me die with regret, right?" Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes. This guy was too good at pretending. They clearly had the Black Tower, so even if everyone here died, the two of them would still be able to live on well. Reading on a cell phone was more refreshing. Chapter 10:18. The demonic snake horde attacked. Bang bang bang. Their attacks were extremely varied. Some of them spat out water bombs, some of them swept their tails, and some of them moved the pieces of the ship underwater. Their goal was the same, and that was to throw Ling Han and the others off the pieces of the ship. As long as they fell into the water, the demon snake would be able to turn all these martial artists into food with a small price. This time, no one dared to hold back. They all used their full strength, not daring to be careless in the slightest. Otherwise, they would be putting their lives on the line. Although Ling Han was not worried about his life, if he sank to the bottom of the sea, it would be a big problem for him to return to the shore. Therefore, he exerted his full strength, using his body as a bow and his yuan power as an arrow, shooting at the group of snakes in the distance. Although he didn't use the godly metal arrow, he could still unleash battle prowess surpassing 5 stars. One had to realize that Ling Han's cultivation level had already reached the early stage of the medium extreme, and after increasing his battle prowess by 5 stars, his battle prowess was equivalent to the middle stage of the high extreme. With a single arrow, as long as it wasn't a demonic snake in the high extreme, it would definitely be insta-killed. It couldn't be helped. The annihilating dragon star arrow was too fast. Those who weren't as strong as Ling Han wouldn't be able to dodge it. Although cultivators were afraid of close combat, they would generally only open up a distance of 2 to 3 feet to maximize their battle prowess. However, this distance was completely incomparable to the annihilating dragon star arrow. Thus, when it came to killing efficiency, no one could compare to Ling Han. Seeing this, Yang Taiching decided that he might as well just defend and not attack. He only guarded the safety of this piece of the hull so that Ling Han could attack to his heart's content. Shio, 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 shio. Arrow after arrow flew out, causing great damage. Bam! The surface of the water suddenly burst open, and a huge snake demon drilled out. The stripes on its body were astonishingly silver. Snake King Yang Tietching's expression instantly became extremely ugly. Shua, the moment the Snake King appeared, it opened its mouth, and spat out a water bullet, which shot toward Yang Taicheng. The speed of this water bullet was actually not inferior to the annihilating dragon star arrow. The Snake King opened its mouth, and that water bullet flew out, instantly arriving in front of Yang Taicheng. Ha! Yang Taicheng punched out with all the power in his fist. Peng, his fist landed on the water bomb, but his whole body was directly sent flying. He flew a distance of several hundred meters, and only then did he fall into the sea with a splash. Even someone as strong as Yang Taicheng was not a match for a single strike from the Snake King. Everyone was shocked. Were they really going to be annihilated here? Peng, a figure burst out of the water. It was Yang Taicheng. His legs seemed to be flying as he sprinted on the surface of the sea. Along the way, he formed a wave. Spiritual essence rose from the top of his head, and his forehead was drenched in cold sweat. The gravity in this region of the sea was too strong, and if he wanted to resist this kind of gravity, he would have to expend a huge amount of origin power. Thus, even if it was only a short distance of several thousand feet, Yang Taicheng still had to pay a huge price. It couldn't be helped. If he sank to the bottom, then he would basically be dead. Instantly, several dozen large snakes went forward to attack, but Yang Taicheng was now a 3-star genius in the consummate level, and a punch from him was enough to kill a large snake. Instantly, the sky was filled with a rain of blood. The Snake King was furious, and with a dive, it was already in front of Yang Taicheng when it reappeared. Its head was raised high, and it was about to shoot another water bullet. Go! Ling Han shot out an arrow. This time, not only did he use the Eye of Truth to find the weak point of the Snake King's defense, he also activated the Flame Divine pattern, which was even more threatening. Even the Snake King did not dare to take this arrow head-on. Pa! The Snake King swung its tail, and sent the Origin Power arrow flying. However, Yang Taicheng also took the opportunity to change his position. With a leap in the air, he landed on a wooden plank. Though the wooden plank was small, it gave him a chance to catch his breath, and he floated and sank on the surface of the sea. The Snake King was furious, and suddenly turned around. Its 2 lantern-sized eyes stared at Ling Han, exuding a boundless chill. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. This Snake King was too frightening, and should be infinitely close to the Sun-Moon tier. That was why it could make him feel a boundless chill just by staring at him. Once this attack was unleashed, it would definitely be earth-shattering. It's all this brat's fault that attracted the Snake King's attention. Push him into the sea, lest he implicates us. Luo Wu and Fan Yong were also on this piece of wreckage, and they were both staring fiercely at Ling Han. The Snake King had obviously set its eyes on Ling Han, so if this big guy pounced, even they would be doomed. However, as long as they pushed Ling Han into the water, then they would at least be able to survive for a while. As long as they were alive, there would be hope. They would be able to survive until the next large ship arrived, and then they would be able to escape from their predicament. Why don't the 2 of you go down? Ling Han asked coldly. These 2 people were really selfish to the extreme. They were already at a time like this, and they were actually still fighting amongst themselves. If you don't go down, we'll send you down. Luo Wu and Fan Yong moved at the same time. They had come for Ling Han in the first place, but they hadn't dared to make a move so openly before. However, for the sake of their own lives now, how could they care about such things? These 2 people were both elites in the high extreme, so the might of their attacks was naturally astonishing. Ling Han humphed, and activated the 7-kill subduing soul technique. His target was Fan Yong, but there was actually a flicker of light on the latter's body, which forcibly blocked his spiritual attack. Ha 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 ha, this is a secret treasure bestowed by young master, refined by an elite of the heavenly body tier. It can resist spiritual attacks. You didn't expect this, did you? Fan Yong laughed loudly. It was a pity that the divine sword was in Zhuo Zhao's hands. Otherwise, he would be able to slice Ling Han in two at the waist right now. However, that was fine. He and Luo Wu would definitely be able to blast Ling Han into the sea. Pang! The two of them attacked together, and sure enough, Ling Han was forcibly shaken off the fragment of the ship and fell into the sea with a thud. Ling Han! Shui Yanyu exclaimed in surprise. She actually took the initiative to jump into the sea. Foolish woman. Fan Yong couldn't help but curse upon seeing this. However, his expression was extremely ugly. He knew how infatuated Zhao Luan was with this woman, and he had wanted to marry her the moment he advanced to the Sun Moon tier. However, there was a 99% chance that Shui Yanyu would die at the bottom of the sea. How were he and Zhou Xiao going to explain this to Zhao Luan when they returned? However, he didn't have any spare time to think about this huge problem. The demonic snake once again launched a fierce attack, its attacks like a tidal wave. Kill, 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 kill. Although there weren't many of them, mountain river tier cultivators were all immortals. Every single one of them was equivalent to the condensation of the essence of heaven and earth, and the blood that flowed from them contained powerful vitality and power. Soon, the surrounding sea was dyed the color of blood. This attracted many small fries, but it also attracted even stronger creatures. A large, flat fish appeared. Its two eyes were actually on one side, and its speed was extraordinarily fast. Its large mouth was wide open, and as it floated up from the bottom of the sea, at least a dozen large snakes were swallowed into its mouth, directly disappearing into nothingness. This was a terrifying demonic beast at the Sun Moon tier. Chapter 1020. The two pieces of the ship were now like two small boats, carrying the survivors as they drifted on the sea. They were trying their best to return to the Yang clan's route. This way, they would only need 3 days at most before they would encounter the Yang clan's ship and be rescued. However, they did not encounter any good fortune after surviving the disaster. Not long after, they encountered a huge storm, which made them dizzy and lost all sense of direction. When the storm calmed down, Yang Taiching took out his compass and compared it, and discovered that they had deviated very dramatically from the normal route. They had no choice but to row as hard as they could and return to their original route. Fortunately, they were all immortal level experts, so they did not need to worry about food and water. Very soon, night fell, and everyone took turns to rest. However, none of them dared to relax too much, because they were all scheming against each other. Who could trust who? Early in the morning, a red sun jumped out from the sea's surface, extremely magnificent. There seems to be a ship over there. A black dot appeared in front of them. Everyone focused their eyes, and there was indeed something floating on the sea's surface. Be careful, it might be a pirate. Yang Taiching said. This place had completely deviated from the Yang clan's route. Theoretically, it was impossible for the Yang clan's ship to appear here, so the possibility of it being a pirate ship was very high. That's not right. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, shook his head, and said, that's not a ship, but an island. The reason why it looked like a ship was because this island was really too far away from them. An island. Everyone's spirits rose. If they could get on the island, they could make some repairs and at least make a few real oars, or even a sail. It would be better than what they were doing now, right? They rowed forward again, and after a long time, the island became bigger and bigger before their eyes. Finally, they could clearly see that it was indeed an island, and it was very big. This shocked quite a few people. How could Ling Han's eyesight be so good? After another long period of time, they finally reached the shore. Let's split up and gather here one day later. Gather all the materials that can be used, Yang Taiching said. Yang Taiching said. He put away the two pieces of the ship to prevent anyone from leaving on their own and leaving everyone else on the island. He was the strongest, and he was also the captain, so he naturally had the final say. Moreover, he was more trustworthy. Otherwise, no one would feel at ease leaving the two boats in the hands of others. Luo Wu and Fan Yong knew each other. After going through trials and tribulations together, they had already formed an alliance. Now that everyone was going to move separately, they naturally had their eyes on Ling Han. Unfortunately, Yang Taiching had chosen to travel with Ling Han, and their plan to follow and assassinate him was foiled. In fact, Ling Han was also very disappointed. He still had the crimson ground locking net that he hadn't used, so he wouldn't have to fear even cultivators at the high extreme. Moreover, if he used the 7-kill subduing soul technique to paralyze his opponent, and then directly drew him into the Black Tower, he would definitely be able to kill any opponent in the high extreme. This island was very large, and was long and narrow. Right now, they were about 1/3 of the island. Thus, they had split into two groups. One group headed east, and the other group headed west. The island was densely covered with forests, and each tree was at least 300 meters tall. Their leaves were very plump, so when one walked under the trees, there was almost no light that could pass through. It appeared very eerie. There were 6 people in Ling Han's group. Aside from him and Shui Yanyu, there was also Yang Taicheng, Yin Yuanxiang, Fu Tian, and Jin Zhihui. It was very obvious that Yang Taicheng had separated Ling Han from his enemies. After they set off, Ling Han smiled at the sword-hugging youth, and said, "Brother Jin, don't you feel tired hugging a sword all day long?" Jin Zhihui shook his head, and said, "Only by constantly experiencing the feelings of the sword can I forge a supreme sword. Is this a sword fanatic?" Shui Yanyu suddenly faltered, and said, "Could it be that Brother Jin is from Swordforge Manor?" If it were any other man, being stared at by such a seductive beauty like Shui Yanyu, they would probably be jumping up and down with excitement. However, Jin Zhihui did not have any reaction at all. He only hugged his sword, as if this was the true lover of his life. "I indeed come from Swordforge Manor." He nodded, appearing to be completely unsophisticated. "As expected." Shui Yanyu nodded. The people of Swordforge Manor were all surnamed Jin. "What is Swordforge Manor?" Ling Han asked. Swordforge Manor is the most renowned holy land for forging tools on Joint Peace Planet. However, this manor only forges swords, and does not forge any other types of weapons. The weapons they forge are not only sharp and sturdy, but many also have wondrous special effects, Shui Yanyu explained. Every swordsman takes pride in owning a sword from the Swordforge Manor. "So awesome." Ling Han couldn't help but smile, and said, "Brother Jin, if I have materials in the future, can I ask you to forge a sword for me?" Yang Taiching couldn't help but shake his head. He had naturally heard of Swordforge Manor, and knew that the people of this manor were very strange. They were clearly renowned in the world, yet did not care about money or power at all, and were busy forging swords all day long. But though they liked forging swords, who they forged for depended on their mood. For some people, it was useless even if they paid tens of thousands of gold, but there were also some people who were given a sword without a single penny. If Ling Han spoke rashly like this, he would probably be mercilessly rejected by Jin Zhihui. "Sure." Jin Zhihui nodded without hesitation. "Pooh." Yang Taicheng almost spluttered. Didn't they say that everyone in Swordforge Manor had strange temperaments? Why did they agree so readily? Jin Zhihui scratched his head, and said slightly bashfully, "However, I have not forged a sword yet." "Phew. No wonder he agreed so readily. He should be an apprentice, right?" Yet Ling Han laughed loudly, clapped the other's shoulder, and said, "Then it's settled. In the future, I'll leave my sword to you. Aren't you afraid that I'll waste materials?" Jin Zhihui asked in surprise. If anyone else heard him say this, they would probably directly shake their heads. Even out of consideration for his face, they would change the topic, and not mention the matter of forging swords again. Ling Han said, "Just based on what you said just now, experience the feeling of a sword, I am sure that you will definitely be able to forge an exceptional sword." Jin Zhihui couldn't help but feel excited. Even in Swordforge Manor, he had not obtained the approval of a single person. Even his father had advised him not to daydream. Only this man in front of him had given him his approval. Most importantly, though he had said, experience the feeling of a sword, now that it had come from Ling Han's mouth, it made him feel as if he had found a confidant. Alright, in the future, I will definitely forge an exceptional sword for you. He clenched his fists, his eyes shining. Before, he had always been a man of few words, but now he was a chatterbox, treating Ling Han as a confidant, and continuously speaking. Brother Ling, I want to forge the strongest sword in the world, he said. Chapter 10:21. The strongest sword. Ling Han was surprised. This was not said casually. Was there such a thing as the strongest in the world? There was always a higher mountain, and there could only be stronger. Where did the strongest come from? Yang Taicheng and the others all shook their heads. The strongest should only be the naive thoughts of a child. The strongest sword. Jin Zhihui nodded repeatedly. I will definitely forge the strongest sword. How? Ling Han was very interested. Jin Zhihui's mind was filled with forging swords, and now that he had Ling Han as a close friend, he naturally did not mind sharing secrets with him. He said, I am currently researching a kind of material. If I can successfully refine it, there is hope to forge the strongest sword. Pooh! Yang Taicheng and the others were all disdainful. What kind of material was so awesome? If there really was such a material, would there still be a place for you to research? It would have long been snatched away by others. Yet Jin Zhihui did not even look at these people. Instead, he continued, this is a kind of material that has unlimited possibilities for improvement. You know, when we forge a sword, no matter how much effort we spend, we will still be limited by the material itself. That's right. Ling Han nodded. You could not possibly forge level 1 godly metal into a level 2 god tool. The material itself determined that this was an impossible thing. However, if we can successfully extract that kind of material, I should say extract it, and forge it into a weapon, it can swallow other materials or god tools on its own. From level 1 to level 2, from level 2 to level 3, there is unlimited room for improvement, Jin Zhihui said excitedly. Instantly, Yang Taicheng and the others all opened their eyes wide. Even their mouths were about to open in shock. A god tool that had unlimited room for improvement. To say nothing of realizing it, just thinking about it made one's scalp go numb. Would an ordinary person think of such a fantasy? If such a god tool really appeared, then the whole world would undergo a revolution because of it. Ling Han was also stunned for a moment, and then heavily patted Jin Zhihui's shoulder. Brother Jin, you are definitely a genius, the one and only. Jin Zhihui's expression was filled with gratitude. When he told this theory to his clansmen and even his father, all he received was mockery and ridicule. Even his father, who was the best to him, advised him to give up on such an unrealistic idea. Brother Ling, do you believe that I can forge such a sword? He asked. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, if I don't give it a try, then there's really no possibility at all. Even if there's only a 1 in a billion chance of success through hard work, there's still a glimmer of hope. Yes. Jin Zhihui nodded his head repeatedly. Ling Han's words had really touched the bottom of his heart. He felt that he had met a confidant and wanted to dig out his heart and lungs. Yang Taicheng and the others, however, lost interest. The strongest sword technique sounded awesome, but no matter how they thought about it, it was impossible. Brother Ling, when I finish forging the divine sword, I'll send it over to you, Jin Zhihui said. He loved forging swords, but he was not a swordsman. In reality, all of the sword forge manners people were outstanding hammering masters, because forging weapons required them to constantly swing their hammers, so they were not used to using swords. Then I'm looking forward to it, Ling Han said with a smile. Jin Zhihui nodded heavily. It was because he had encountered a bottleneck that he had wandered around everywhere, changing his mood and seeking inspiration. The fierce battles of life and death these few days had given him some comprehension. But though he did not have much life experience, he himself was not an idiot. Regarding this, he did not leak any information at all. He had already decided that he would go into seclusion and cultivate diligently after he returned. When he came out, perhaps he would have already solved all his problems, and would be able to forge the strongest divine sword in history. The 6 of them walked in the gloomy forest, but all of a sudden, the area in front of them suddenly brightened, and dazzling sunlight appeared. The 6 of them simultaneously opened their mouths due to intense shock. In front of them, an incredibly large and deep pit had actually appeared. This pit was really ridiculously large, occupying almost a third of the entire island's space. Moreover, it was unknown how deep it was. The walls of the pit were completely straight, without the slightest bit of cushioning, and were as smooth as a mirror. It was as if a huge pillar that reached into the heavens had stabbed into this place, leaving behind such an eye of heaven and earth. This was too sudden. Their front foot was still in the forest, but in the next step, the forest disappeared, and such a cliff appeared. If they were not careful, they would directly step over it. It should be known that the gravity in this world was terrifyingly strong, and even flight god tools were useless here. Once they fell into such a deep pit, it was really uncertain whether they could still come out. There was nothing to be afraid of in the sea, because the slope of the sea was gentle. If you walked in a certain direction at the bottom of the sea, there would definitely be a day when you would reach the shore, but here? If they fell down, it was extremely likely that they would never come out again. Everyone stuck their heads out from the edge of the cliff, and saw that below them was an immeasurably deep darkness, as if they could reach the center of the joint peace planet's crust. If that was really the case, even heavenly body tier elites would die if they fell down. The divine fire inside the planet was definitely able to burn even heavenly body tier elites into ashes. When they stuck their heads out, there was still the pull of gravity. Everyone hurriedly pulled their bodies back. If they lost their center of gravity and fell down, they would be done for. Lord Yang, have you heard of this island? Ling Han asked. Yang Tiecheng's expression was filled with shock. He shook his head slowly, and said, I am ashamed. Though the Yang clan is known as the overlord of the Star Sea, we do not know of the existence of such an island. True enough, even the Yang clan did not know. Everyone was silent. Suddenly, this island was shrouded in a veil of mystery. And though mystery would arouse one's curiosity, it similarly represented unknown danger. Ling Han chopped off a large tree, and then tossed it into this deep pit. Xiao, the large tree landed, and soon became a small black dot. Then, it was swallowed by the darkness in the deep pit, and there was not the slightest trace of it. And after a long, long time, there was still no sound of impact. This place is not connected to the sea, Ling Han said. Everyone nodded. Though they had climbed some mountains on their way to the island, the sea level was definitely not so low. There should have been the sound of trees crashing into the sea long ago. If it was connected to the sea, then after entering it to explore, they could still find an underwater passage to enter the sea, and then think of a way to go ashore. But the situation now was that this pit could really reach a depth of several tens of thousands of meters. This was too frightening. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, but it was useless. He could not reach the bottom either. Yang Taicheng was the first to show a wary expression. Very soon, Ling Han and the others all showed wary expressions, and looked to the left. Hua La, 3 people suddenly walked out from the forest. They were not Luo Wu, Fan Yong, or Lu Ying, but rather 3 young men, respectively sitting on a tiger, a wolf, and a leopard. But upon closer inspection, one would discover that these 3 ferocious beasts were not real, but rather made from metal. They could not be said to be lifelike, and one would be able to tell with a slight closer inspection. Puppeteer! Yang Taicheng and the others exclaimed at the same time. Chapter 1022. There were all kinds of extraordinary people in the immortal realm. The most common, but also the one with the highest status, was alchemists. If you didn't have a weapon, then you could buy a piece of godly metal, and you could forge a usable weapon no matter how hard you tried. And after using it for a long time, your own martial art intent would be infused into the weapon, and it could actually be used as a god tool that belonged only to you. In the immortal realm, the definition of a god tool was a weapon that anyone could wield, and possessed immortal level might. Thus, the difference between a weapon nurtured by oneself and a god tool was that one could only be used by oneself, and would be useless in the hands of others, while the other could be used by anyone as long as they had enough power to wield it. Of course, artificers were also extraordinary people. They could brand special formations and other complicated things on weapons, so that the weapon could become like a cultivator and possess great might. Because of this, artificers also had a high status. Every cultivator yearned for a suitable weapon. Additionally, artificers could also make armor and increase defense. Only when one was alive would there be endless possibilities. Aside from that, there were also formation masters. For example, the Great Formation in the imperial capital was created by a formation master, and he had a very high status on the Joint Peace planet. Even the three great emperors were very polite when they saw him. And the next group of extraordinary people belonged to an extremely rare group, such as divination masters, astrologers, and puppeteers. Puppeteers could make an inanimate object seem as if it had life. In the imperial capital, puppeteers could also be found. For example, there were a very small number of carriages that were not driven by demonic beasts, but by puppets. This was a combination of artificing, formations, and even some alchemy, and was very complicated. Thus, the number of puppeteers was pitifully small. Those puppet carriages in the imperial capital were not the works of the current era, but had been left behind a very long time ago. Thus, when three people riding puppet beasts suddenly appeared on the island, Yang Taicheng and the others were naturally shocked. This was a deserted island, and there was even a shocking sinkhole. Puppeteers had even appeared. This was too strange. Ha 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 ha, I didn't think there would be guests on the island, the young man riding the tiger said. I felt some commotion earlier, and thought there was a problem with the machine-operated bird. I didn't think there would really be guests. As the captain, Yang Taicheng naturally would not pass on this responsibility. He clasped his hands and said, We encountered a shipwreck and drifted here. Please tell us what this place is. This is Earth's core island, the young man said with a smile. The young man on the tiger smiled and pointed to the deep pit at the side. We call this the Earth's core cave. It is said that it leads to the center of the Earth. Right, I'm Guo Xiuwen, and these two are my junior brothers, Ning Tai and Dong Yulong. Greetings. Ning Tai and Dong Yulong cupped their fists in salute. Gref of, said Ning Tai. And Ning Island. King. And of, he said, island. Of, world, king, first, have of, said, have, and have of king, said. Everyone, please take a rest in our village. Can we make a boat for you and send you off? Ning Tai said. However, we are used to peace. Please keep our island's location a secret. Don't leak it out and ruin our peaceful life, Dong Yulong said. Yang Taicheng and the others nodded. We still have 3 companions. Though Yang Taicheng didn't like Luo Wu and Fan Yong, as the captain, he still had responsibilities. Got it. 2 of our junior brothers are already hurrying over. We'll meet up in the village later, Guo Xiuwen said with a smile. Yang Taicheng nodded. Everyone, please come with us. Guo Xiuwen urged the tiger he was riding on, and slowly walked down the mountain. Everyone followed. After walking for close to an hour, they finally passed through layers of forest, and a valley appeared in front of them. The mountain walls were steep, and it was surrounded by mountains on all sides. There was only one very narrow entrance. One man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. Such a thought flashed through Ling Han's mind. As long as there was an elite, even if there was an army outside, they wouldn't be able to break in. But similarly, as long as there was an elite blocking this place, the people inside wouldn't be able to come out either. There was no one guarding the entrance. Instead, there were only 2 stone statues. One was an 8-legged spider, and the other was a large bird with its wings spread. Its claws were sturdy, and even thicker than a human's arm. They entered the valley, and suddenly, the valley opened up, revealing a beautiful scene. Here, farmland formed a circle, and in the center was a very, very large village. There were small bridges, flowing water, and houses. It was filled with the scenery of the countryside. Suddenly seeing this scene would cause one to forget the cruelty of battle and the bloodshed of power. Only relaxation and relief would remain. What a good place! Yang Taiching said spontaneously. The 3 of you, I wonder if I can retire here in the future. Guo Xiuwen chuckled, and said, if Brother Yang has decided to retire, why not? But let me remind you that after coming here, please forget your identity as a cultivator. We strictly forbid fighting here. Whether you are in the heavenly body tier or in the shattering void tier, you are only a farmer or a weaver here. Everyone nodded. Every place had its own rules. Even a powerful dragon would not oppress a local snake, what more when they were living under someone else's roof. In the farmland, there were people leading cows and plowing the land, and there were people transplanting rice seedlings. They looked busy yet leisurely. They walked along the small path between the farmland and entered the village. There were a few pedestrians on the street, and the majority stayed inside their houses. Some were watering plants, and some were sunbathing. There was even smoke rising from the chimneys, and it appeared incredibly peaceful. The people here all like peace and quiet, so please do not disturb others. After coming here, everyone will forget their previous identity, Guo Xiuwen reminded. After walking for a while, they arrived at the center of the village. This was a very large manor, which was about 1/3 of the size of the whole village, and was surrounded by walls. The main gate was wide open, and after entering, there was a very large courtyard that was paved with bluestone bricks. It looked a little like a martial arts field, but there was not a single person practicing martial arts. Everyone, I will first arrange your accommodations. My master likes to make strange and rare things, and once he does, he may take a few days, so you may have to wait for a few days before he can introduce you, Guo Xiuwen said apologetically. Everyone said that it was fine. If they did not receive any help, who knew how many days they would have to drift on the boundless sea before they could return to the Yang clan sea route. Thus, they did not mind waiting here for a few days. Guo Xiuwen led them to the left side of the manor. There were many small courtyards here, and they were all assigned to each person. After the arrangements were made, Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Luing also arrived under the guidance of 2 young men. These 2 young men were both Guo Xiuwen's junior brothers. One was called Cui De, and the other was called Bu Zhengyun. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu stayed in the same courtyard. In any case, they had the Black Tower, so they did not care about their living environment. At this time, the sky had also darkened. It's very strange, Ling Han said. Chapter 1024. Something's wrong, it's too suspicious, Shui Yanyu said immediately after returning to her own courtyard. Ling Han nodded, and said, wife is wise. Shui Yanyu rolled her eyes at him in annoyance, and said, are you showing off your foresight? All my achievements are inseparable from wife's guidance. Aren't you my teacher? Ling Han said with a smile. Shui Yenyu's pretty face flushed involuntarily. She had indeed been Ling Han's teacher for a while, and now she was about to be taken to bed by Ling Han. Though they weren't master and disciple, but teacher and student, she still felt shy when she thought about it. That Cui De obviously doesn't want us to investigate. Otherwise, according to what he said, the people here are used to resting early, so why would he stay there in the middle of the night? He's obviously spying on us. Ling Han nodded, and said, unfortunately, I'm naturally curious. The more you don't want me to know, the more I want to know. This time, Shui Yanyu was on Ling Han's side, and said, then should we sneak out later? No, sleep, Ling Han said with a smile. Shui Yanyu was driven mad. Are your thoughts jumping again? Ling Han kissed her, and said, this first day is when our curiosity is the greatest, and also when the other party is the most wary. I think the 5 people on the island should be watching over us. Unless we plan to immediately fall out with them, we definitely can't go out tonight. Then wait until tomorrow. Shui Yanyu asked. Play it by ear, Ling Han said seriously. This valley was easy to defend and difficult to attack. There was only one way in and out, so it was a natural danger zone. Since they had already walked into the trap, they definitely couldn't be impulsive and reckless. Shui Yanyu nodded. In terms of taking the lead, she was increasingly inclined to let Ling Han make the decision. Just in case, they still entered the Black Tower. Shui Yanyu began to cultivate, while Ling Han continued to concoct his heavenly pearl pill. He had to concoct this pill as soon as possible. At that time, not only would it help his cultivation advance, but it would also bring him a lot of income. Cultivation certainly couldn't do without the support of money. At first it was gold and silver, then it was crystals, and now it was true essence stones. But in essence, it was all the same. After one night, Ling Han revealed a satisfied smile. He was getting closer and closer to success. The two of them exited the Black Tower, ate breakfast, and left the courtyard. Some of Yang Tian's group had a good night's sleep and were in high spirits, while others were still exhausted. Clearly, they hadn't slept well last night. After all, people like Yang Taicheng, Fan Yong, and the others all had rich experiences in the outside world, and knew the dangers of the world. They definitely couldn't trust others easily. On the contrary, Jin Zhihui and the others lacked vigilance in this aspect and slept very soundly last night. When they gathered together, Luo Wu and Fan Yong did not conceal their killing intent towards Ling Han at all. However, they were still living under someone else's roof, and Yang Taicheng was also present, so they did not dare to make a move against Ling Han. Everyone, what a coincidence. My master just happened to come out of seclusion today, and would like to meet you all. Guo Xiuwen walked over. Of course, he was still riding that tiger puppet, as if he wouldn't be able to walk without that thing. But on the other hand, puppets could be seen as god tools that could self-awaken, and he rode on puppets all day long. Was he also carefully targeting them? Hee, then we definitely have to pay a visit to Lord Island Master, everyone said with a smile. My master is an extremely brilliant puppeteer, and he's an expert in creating all kinds of strange things. With my master's help, I'm sure he'll be able to create an excellent ship for everyone to safely leave this place, Guo Xiuwen said. These words struck into everyone's hearts. None of them had any plans to retreat into the mountains and forests. Under Guo Xiuwen's lead, they arrived at the main hall of the manor. This was really a main hall. It was over 30 meters deep and 15 meters tall, just like a palace hall. In the innermost part of the main hall, an old man was currently holding a chair. He should be the master of Guo Xiuwen and the others. The old man was very tall. Even when he was sitting, he was still as tall as an ordinary person, and could almost be compared to Yang Taicheng. This old man is Pei Ji. The old man did not stand up, and only nodded at him. Then, he smiled, and said, "It is not that this old man is lacking in manners, but this old man has long since lost both of his legs, and it is not convenient for him to stand up." He opened up his long robe. Indeed, both of his legs were missing below the knees. Thinking back to what he had said, it was likely that they had been chopped off by someone, or there had been an accident, and not naturally so. It's fine, it's fine. Everyone hurriedly shook their heads. Pei Ji said, "This old man already knows what happened to all of you. It just so happens that this old man has some materials on hand, so I will spend a few days to make a small ship for all of you. It will take at least 5 days, and at most 10 days. Once it is done, I will inform all of you." In these few days, all of you can rest well and enjoy a peaceful life. Thank you, Island Master. Everyone was overjoyed. This was a puppeteer, so he definitely had a pair of skillful hands. Peiji nodded. If all of you are interested in making puppets, you can chat with a few of my disciples. This old man also hopes to develop this skill, and let more people learn it. When these words were spoken, everyone was pleasantly surprised. The puppeteer art was the same as the ultimate arts of martial art, and was a type of secret treasure. But Peiji was actually willing to share it. This kind of breadth of mind was really shocking. Even Shui Yenyu could not make up her mind. Was she and Ling Han being overly suspicious? How could this kind of person possibly be a bad person? Peiji chatted with everyone for a while, but it was all empty pleasantries. Very soon, he said that he did not want to waste time, and wanted to start building the ferry. Everyone was naturally happy that he could start as soon as possible, and they all took their leave. Everyone, if you are interested in making puppets, you can come and find us. We will take turns to discuss with you. As long as you all have talent, we will definitely not keep our skills to ourselves, Guo Xiuwen said with a smile. Everyone was very interested, and expressed that they would go and visit them. Ling Han was not greedy. He was now a dual cultivator of martial arts and alchemy, and cultivating two Daos at the same time was already a bit difficult for him, what more when he had to add another puppeteer art. Moreover, he had always firmly believed in his own strength. No matter how strong puppets were, they were still external objects, unlike alchemy, where the pills concocted were at least used to strengthen oneself. Shui Yenyu, on the other hand, wanted to see for herself whether she had talent in this area, but was stopped by Ling Han. He did not feel at ease about this place, so it was best that the two of them did not separate to avoid any accidents. He pulled Shui Yenyu out of the village. Now, did the other party still have a reason to keep him in the manor? Brother Ling and Miss Shui are going out. When they arrived at the entrance of the manor, they saw Bu Zhengyun riding a black ape over, causing even Ling Han to suspect whether these people were also legless like Peiji. Otherwise, why would they be riding on puppets all day long? Yes, going out for a walk. It's rare to see such beautiful scenery, Ling Han said with a smile. Ho ho, I'll accompany you too. Chapter 1025. Regardless of whether Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were willing or not, Bu Zhengyun was obviously determined to follow them. In his words, as the host, he naturally had the duty to accompany his guests, and introduce them to his guests. He accompanied Ling Han and Shui Yenyu, and no matter where they went, he would follow their every step. It could be taken as being very enthusiastic, or it could also be taken as monitoring them. Ling Han had originally wanted to go to the various houses in the village, but the moment he deviated from the main path, Bu Zhengyun would speak up to stop them, and use the excuse that the people here did not like to be disturbed to stop them from going over. He even forbade the two of them from talking to the passers-by on the road. This attempt to cover up only made it more obvious, and instead made Ling Han even more suspicious. However, because he had not yet planned to fall out with the Island Master's faction, Ling Han did not take any drastic actions, and returned to the manor after a simple stroll outside. Luo Wu and Fan Yong had both gone to look for Guo Xiuwen to learn the art of puppetry. If they were really geniuses in this area, then after learning this technique, when they returned to the imperial capital, their status would definitely be able to rise to a whole new level. One would be able to obtain an important position in the clan, and the other would not need to follow Zhao Luan anymore. He would be able to stand on his own, and would have the right to establish his own force. Thus, the two of them were very proactive. At first, Luing did not seem to be interested, but later, she seemed to be moved, and frequently went out. In comparison, Yang Taiching only wanted to return, Jin Zhihui only had the word sword forging in his eyes, Yin Yuanxiang lived in seclusion, and had always been very unsociable. Meanwhile, Fu Tian was completely uninterested in anything other than cultivation. Time passed day by day, and Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Luing simply did not return. It was as if they had become addicted to learning the art of puppetry. On the 7th day, Guo Xiuwen came over to invite Ling Han and Shui Yanyu to view the puppets he was about to make. Ling Han had no interest in learning the art of puppetry, but he was very curious about the uses of puppets. Thus, he readily agreed, and went with Shui Yanyu to the workshop in the manor. There were a total of 2 workshops here, one large and one small. The small workshop was Pei Ji's private property, and even his 5 disciples could only enter after receiving special permission. This was the large workshop. Pei Ji taught the 5 of them how to make puppets here, and they usually practiced here. The workshop was divided into several rooms, and the soundproofing was excellent. Otherwise, how could the people in the other rooms think in peace if they kept banging away? When creating a puppet, from the selection of raw materials to the carving of array patterns and the filling of true origin stones, everything is very particular. Guo Xiuwen introduced the place as he walked. He led Ling Han and Yi Zichen to a house. This was his territory. The place was huge and filled with all kinds of materials and tools. I've been working on a humanoid puppet for the past few days, and it's almost at the final stage. This time, he finally didn't ride on the tiger-shaped puppet, but he still followed by his side. From the back, it was no different from a real tiger, but from the front, its eyes were obviously too fake. There were 2 red gems embedded in its eyes, and they weren't real eyes. He pointed at a humanoid puppet with an infatuated expression on his face. This puppet's whole body was wrapped in white bandages, so it could only be seen that it was humanoid. As for what it was made of, that was completely indiscernible. The achievement of a puppeteer is to create puppets that can pass off as real. He stroked this half-finished puppet, and revealed an excited expression. He said, "Please enjoy." He cut open the puppet's chest. It was empty inside, and 12 pairs of ribs could be clearly seen. However, they weren't white, but a faint gold color. The bones have all gone through special treatment, and have been plated with a layer of godly metal. Because the raw materials used to create the puppet are of different levels, the level of godly metal plating is also different. For this puppet, level 3 godly metal is enough, Guo Xiuwen explained to Ling Han and Yi Zichen as he quickly processed the puppet. Take note, every bone has been carved with array patterns. This is very important. After all, this is not a living body. Only by relying on array patterns can every part of it be activated. Moreover, it has to be considered holistically. Otherwise, the fist will be swinging out, but the feet will be retreating. This naturally won't do. Guo Xiuwen was in high spirits. He didn't care whether Ling Han and Yi Zichen understood or were interested. He just continued to talk like that. The last step is to insert true origin stones to activate the array patterns. He took out a dozen or so true origin stones, and then said to Shui Yanyu, "Miss Shui, do you want to personally insert true origin stones to activate this puppet?" Shui Yanyu hurriedly shook her head. Though she knew this was only a tool, with the concept of human in mind, she naturally felt that such an action was extremely disgusting. Guo Xiuwen snickered, and didn't try to persuade her further. Instead, he said, "No matter how powerful an existence is, it will all have its end, and no matter how beautiful a woman, there will also be a moment when she will wither." He stuffed the true origin stones into the puppet's stomach one by one. Then, he stared at Shui Yanyu, his eyes burning with passion. "Miss Shui, you are so beautiful and enchanting. This kind of appearance, this kind of body, you should remain forever, and not age. Otherwise, it would be a kind of evil." "This has nothing to do with Brother Guo, right?" Ling Han interrupted. "Hee, I've lost my composure, I've lost my composure." Guo Xiuwen hurriedly apologized as he closed up the chest of the puppet. Of course, he didn't use a needle and thread, but rather multiple iron rings. He fastened up the chest area, and after a closer look, he found that the other end of the iron rings was pierced through the spine. "Now, please enjoy." He took a step back, a fanatical expression on his face. When, this puppet suddenly opened its eyes, and then stood up with a whoosh. It seemed to be a little dazed, looking left and right. Every year or so, a kind of substance would seep out from the Earth's core cave, and we call it divine mist. When the divine mist is infused into the puppet, it will trigger an unexpected effect, for example. Guoxiuan said from the side. This puppet suddenly stared at Ling Han, its gaze no longer wandering. Through the gaps of the bandages, it could be seen that a pair of eyes was exuding a light like that of an evil wolf. The humanoid puppet released a low roar, and with a stomp of its foot, it suddenly charged at Ling Han. This burst of speed was extremely fast. It stretched out a hand, and it could be seen that two of its fingers were not wrapped in bandages. They were like metal, and the tips of its fingers were incredibly sharp, exuding a cold luster. Ling Han was unafraid, and greeted the attack with a punch. Pang! In the exchange of blows, Ling Han couldn't help but take a few steps back. Meanwhile, that puppet only trembled slightly, and its figure stabilized. It released another sharp howl, and once again attacked Ling Han. The strength of the middle stage of the high extreme of the mountain river tier, or even the late stage, Ling Han estimated. He activated the divine patterns of gravity, and that puppet instantly staggered, almost falling over. However, Ling Han also frowned, feeling very strained. His opponent only had the strength of the high extreme, yet he felt such a strained feeling. There could only be one reason, and that was that his opponent was too heavy. The same effect of gravity, applied on a rock and a mountain, naturally consumed completely different amounts of power. Thinking of what Guoxiuan had said before, he said that the skeleton of the puppet was plated with godly metal, so its weight had to be astonishing. What Ling Han didn't understand was why this puppet would attack him. Guoxiuan clearly hadn't given the order. Boom, boom, boom. The puppet continued to attack, as if it was determined to kill Ling Han. Chapter 1026. Stop! Quick, make it stop! Shui Yanyu called out to Guoxiuan. She was not worried about Ling Han's safety. As long as this damn pervert was not killed instantly, then with his recovery ability, he would be in immortal existence. But who would like to be attacked for no reason? Guoxiuan grinned, and said, Miss Shui, I did not give the order to attack. This puppet completely acted on its own. How is that possible? Shui Yanyu said angrily. This puppet was made by you. If you did not give the order, why would it attack? Miss Shui, have you forgotten what I said before? Guoxiuan was not angry at all, and said, a mysterious substance will drift out from the Earth's core cave. If it is fused into the puppet, it will produce a very strange effect. Like what? Shui Yanyu calmed down. Ling Han and that puppet were fighting very fiercely, and the victor could not be determined in a short while. Thus, she was not anxious. Guoxiuan showed a strange smile, and said, for example, the material will retain a part of its memory. Shui Yanyu did not understand. What did retaining a part of its memory mean? What did it have to do with attacking Ling Han? However, a thought flashed through Ling Han's mind. This puppet couldn't pose any threat to him. Thus, he was completely capable of multitasking. He battled with the puppet while listening to the conversation between Shui Yanyu and Guoxiuan. Could it be? His eyes became serious, and he drew out his divine sword. Each strike was swift and fierce. Shwa, 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 shwa. After a few dozen strikes, pieces of cloth flew, and the bandages covering the puppet's face were torn apart, revealing its hidden face. Yes, yes, yes. Shui Yanyu's eyes swept over it, and she could not help but show an expression of extreme shock. No, it should be said that it was fear. Guoxiuan showed a devilish smile, and said, not bad, not bad. As you can see, the material of this puppet has retained a considerable amount of its memory. Thus, it will attack without receiving my order. That puppet was shockingly Luo Wu. Hiss, he disappeared for a few days, and was actually made into a puppet? Or was this merely an imitation of Luo Wu's appearance? Ling Han suddenly came to a realization and said, "No wonder you don't let us enter the houses of the villagers, let alone communicate with them. They are all puppets." Ha 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 ha. Guo Xiuwen laughed heartily and clapped his hands continuously. Not bad, not bad. You've guessed it correctly. That's really commendable. After all, there aren't many people like you who can figure it out with just a hint. Ling Han was constantly dodging, and Luo Wu was launching fierce attacks at him. Luo Wu's strongest desire when he was alive had been to kill Ling Han. Thus, after being made into a puppet, this had become a memory that he could not forget. Why, you guys are practically deranged. Shui Yanyu berated. She was naturally aware now that everything the other party had said previously was a lie. They had absolutely no intention of preparing a ship for them to leave. Instead, they were merely trying to keep them here. Wrong, wrong. We've actually only turned you guys into eternal puppets, Guo Xiuwen said with a smile. Think about it. How long can you guys live? How many people can break through to the Sun-Moon tier? You guys can only live for a few 100,000 years at most. Won't you guys still decay and return to heaven and earth? However, after being made into puppets, you guys will forever maintain your current appearance. Miss Shui, you're so alluring, so why don't you keep this kind of beauty forever? He stared at Shui Yanyu, his eyes filled with infatuation. Ha, why don't you guys become your own puppets? Ling Han broke away from Luo Wu, and charged toward Guo Xiuwen. Ong! The puppet tiger actually released a furious roar, and the sound waves transformed into multiple circles that surged toward Ling Han. Ling Han's charging figure instantly slowed down, becoming slower and slower. The clothes on his body were also forcefully shredded. Peng, he was suddenly sent flying back. He couldn't help but be astonished. The strength of this puppet tiger had actually reached the consummate level of the mountain river tier. In fact, it might even be in the late stage or peak stage of the mountain river tier. Ha 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 ha, since I've let you guys know the secret of this place, how could I not be prepared? Guo Xiuwen laughed, and said, however, don't worry, all of you will be made into puppets. Just thinking about it makes my heart beat faster. A puppet as beautiful as you is, playing with it a few times a day won't be too much. His last sentence was directed at Shui Yanyu. Though this had exposed his dark and perverted fetish, in any case, these two people would be made into puppets very soon, so what did it matter even if they knew about it? Shui Yanyu was both embarrassed and angry, and scolded, disgusting. I guarantee that I'll restore you 100% to your original appearance, and there won't be the slightest bit of distortion. An evil light flickered in Guo Xiuwen's eyes. He had absolutely no interest in normal beauties. Only after being made into an icy cold puppet would he be able to arouse his perverted desires. Not only him, but the 6 of them, master and disciples, were all such perverts. Who? Luo Wu and the puppet tiger both attacked Ling Han ferociously, especially the puppet tiger. Its battle prowess was as high as the consummate level, and it wasn't a real living being, so it didn't have any vital points to speak of. Its muscles, skin, and bones had all been reforged, and it was practically a human-shaped weapon. Ling Han channeled his divine patterns of gravity, but immediately showed signs of strain. That puppet tiger was even heavier than Luo Wu, so it was really a huge challenge for Ling Han to make the divine patterns of gravity work on it. Shui Yanyu gave a soft shout, and drew her sword to join the battle. Guo Xiuwen, however, didn't make a move. He merely crossed his legs at the side, appearing to be full of confidence. Of these two people, one was in the early stage of the medium extreme, while the other was in the peak stage of the low extreme. Theoretically, even Luo Wu would be able to suppress them, what more when there was a puppet tiger with battle prowess in the late stage of the consummate level. He was standing guard here because he was afraid that these two puppets wouldn't hold back, and would tear Shui Yanyu to shreds. Huh? Soon, an expression of surprise appeared on his face because he discovered that Ling Han's defenses were really quite terrifying. He was actually able to withstand the attacks of the two puppets, which was inconceivable to him. Ha 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 ha, what a genius. His surprise immediately turned into wild joy. This person's physique is incredibly tough, and it's worth using level 5 or even level 6 godly metal to cast his skeleton. Although he's only in the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, I'm confident that I can inscribe sun-moon tier formation patterns on his bones. At that time, he'll be a sun-moon tier puppet. Ha 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 ha, Master also only has 2 pseudo-sun-moon tier puppets. If I can refine a sun-moon tier puppet, I'll be able to replace him, and control all the resources here. After killing this person, I'll hide him, and lie that his body was too damaged, so he couldn't be refined into a puppet, and I've already disposed of him. In any case, Master and Junior brothers only care about this woman. When I learn how to refine sun-moon tier puppets, I'll suddenly become the new master of this place. Shio. Right at this moment, Ling Han broke through the encirclement, and charged toward him. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. Chapter 1028. Why you can't kill me, or else my master will definitely not let you off. Guo Xiuwen said in a trembling voice. Ling Han shook his head, and said, I thought that a pervert like you would be cruel to others, and also cruel to yourself. Why are you so spineless? He waved his hand, and tossed Luo Wu's corpse out. This was really a corpse, because the true origin stones inside had already been extracted, and the formation patterns had also been destroyed. Aside from the fact that the skeleton was still relatively hard, there was not much difference between this and an ordinary corpse. You dealt with this puppet, right? Ling Han pointed at the corpse, and said, you dug out all the internal organs of a person. With such ruthlessness, you would be afraid if it was your turn. Guo Xiuwen's entire body trembled, and he defended himself, no, it's not the same. That's just a material, not a person. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This person's outlook on life had already been completely twisted. He was obviously greedy for life, but his methods were incredibly vile and cruel. He slapped him, and said, I don't want to read your dirty memories. Just answer my questions. Shui Yanyu walked over, and pressed the tip of her sword against Guo Xiuwen's neck. She said, what's the point of wasting words with this kind of person? Just kill him. No. Guo Xiuwen was scared to death. Don't kill me. I'll tell you what you want to know, please don't kill me. Amidst his screams, the sound of urine could be heard. This guy had actually wet his pants in fear. Shui Yanyu hurriedly covered her nose, and hid far away. Ling Han also wanted to kick him. It was really rare to see someone so afraid of death. He said coldly, then tell me everything you know. Okay, I'll tell. Guo Xiuwen nodded repeatedly. He began to tell a story. As early as 30,000 years ago, he had already become Pei Ji's disciple. At that time, he should have only been 6 or 7 years old, perhaps 2 years older, or perhaps 2 years younger. This had already become a blurry memory. In these 30,000 years, he learned martial arts and puppetry from Pei Ji, and in this process, he also gained 4 junior brothers. Before, he did not know how he had become Pei Ji's disciple, but he saw his own shadow in these 4 junior brothers. Although this island was very remote, there were always all kinds of accidents at sea, such as tsunamis or encounters with pirates. For decades, or centuries, there were people who occasionally drifted here, but they were all refined into puppets by Pei Ji. Sometimes, there were refugees with children, and Pei Ji would pick those with good aptitude and take them as disciples. However, when he discovered that they had no future, he would mercilessly kill them. Because of this, Guo Xiuwen deduced that he was also a descendant of some refugee. His parents and relatives had been killed by Pei Ji, but because of his good aptitude, he was spared and accepted as a disciple. At that time, he had not remembered anything, or Pei must him, but because, Pei, Dao, and, NXT. However, even though he had deduced the truth, he didn't dare to harbor the slightest bit of hatred toward Pei Ji. This was because Pei Ji possessed 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets. Even if the 5 of them teamed up, they would still be insta-killed. Pei Ji was an outstanding puppeteer, but he seemed to have been traumatized by something, and had no desire to display his talent. He became the local tyrant of this island, bringing nightmares to those who drifted here. As for where Pei Ji had come from, and where he had learned puppetry, Guo Xiuwen did not know. He only knew that the sinkhole was very mysterious. Every year, a mysterious substance would drift out. It was like mist, and after being captured and fused with the body of a puppet, it could make the puppet even stronger. Moreover, it would normally take a few months to create a puppet, but with the help of the divine mist, it could be completed in a few days. Divine Mistling Han was a little curious, and asked, "Where is it?" "Let me see." Guo Xiuwen crawled to his feet, trembling. He opened a cabinet, took out a jade bottle, and said, "The divine mist is sealed inside." His eyes were lowered, and a sinister look flashed in his eyes. This divine mist was very helpful for creating puppets, but if a living person breathed in, their mind would be directly corroded, and they would become a weapon that only knew how to kill. They were very similar to puppets, except that they would not listen to orders. Then, as long as he dealt with Ling Han, he would not be afraid of the remaining woman. Ling Han took the bottle, and naturally would not rashly open it. Instead, he threw Guo Xiuwen into the Black Tower, and then entered with Shui Yanyu. To study the unknown, it was naturally the safest to do it in the Black Tower. Small tower, analyze what this is. Ling Han threw the jade bottle out, and with a thought, "Pa," the jade bottle was instantly shattered. A black mist immediately surged in the air, transforming into various forms. One moment it was a beast, the next moment it was a bird, and the next moment it was a human. However, there was a single horn on its forehead and a tail on its buttocks. Demonic Qi. Small Tower appeared, and said almost at the same time as Ling Han. This was definitely demonic Qi. Ling Han had seen it in the lower realm, but although it was only a wisp, it was far stronger than the Azura Demon Emperor's. Oh, right. With a thought, the Azura Demon Emperor was captured by Ling Han. This demon had always been exiled in the Black Tower. "Greetings, Master." "Master is as blessed as the heavens, and has boundless longevity," the Azura Demon Emperor said very obsequiously, vividly displaying the appearance of a despicable person. He glanced at Shui Yanyu, and immediately knelt again, saying, "Greetings, Madam. Master really has good taste. Madam is as beautiful as a goddess, and has an elegant bearing. She is definitely a peerless beauty that only appears once in millions and millions of years." Shui Yanyu was stunned. How could there be such an obsequious person? Did he have no shame? Ling Han humphed, and said, "Don't say such nonsense. Quick, tell me the origin of that demonic Qi." "Yes, yes." The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly nodded and bowed, looking at that wisp of demonic Qi. His smoke-like body involuntarily moved violently, and he said in a trembling voice, This is a wisp of Demon Master's demonic Qi." "Demon Master," Ling Han glared at him, and said, "Speak more clearly." The Azura Demon Emperor didn't have any temper now, and nodded and bowed again. In the immortal realm, Genesis tier is called Saint, and in our netherworld, elites of this level are called Demon Masters. Shui Yanyu was surprised, and interrupted, "He's actually a demonic being of the netherworld? This lowly one is. Madam's eyes are indeed like a torch. Under your wisdom, all of my thoughts are like sunlight, and have nowhere to hide." The Azura Demon Emperor flattered madly. Ling Han was shocked. This was actually the aura left behind by a demon master on the same level as Genesis tier. Hold on, in the flame cave of the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, wasn't there a passageway suppressed, and a being who called himself Demon Master Zhen Yi was trying his best to fight his way over? Hiss, he had actually argued with a great elite of the Genesis tier. Madam's beauty is like the sun in the sky, and can blind one's eyes. Madam's temperament is like the bright moon, so pure that it makes one feel ashamed of their inferiority. The Azura Demon Emperor was still shamelessly praising Shui Yenyu, but he suddenly pounced toward that wisp of demonic qi. Ha ha ha, as long as I fuse with this wisp of demonic qi, my strength will greatly increase, and I'll recover to the battle prowess of the mountain river tier. Killing you all will be as easy as slaughtering chickens. He shouted excitedly. Chapter 1029. The Azura Demon Emperor was also a coward. In order to survive, he had kneeled before Ling Han, who was in the heaven tier, back then. As the saying went, a man could bend and stand tall, and he kept bending so that he could one day straighten his back like a little brother. Now was the best chance. He passed through the barrier of two realms, and forced his way into a small world. His battle prowess was greatly reduced, and he only had 15 stars of Shattering Void tier battle prowess left. Thus, he knew that he was no match for a freak like Ling Han. But as long as he absorbed this wisp of demonic qi, his battle prowess could recover to the low extreme of the mountain river tier. No matter how freakish Ling Han was, could he match the power of immortals? What a joke! The demonic qi was already right in front of him, and the Azura Demon Emperor revealed an intoxicated expression. Being able to absorb this wisp of demonic qi on the level of a demon master would greatly improve him, because there was a sliver of a demon master's comprehension of martial art within it. For beings of the immortal realm, this was a fatal poison, but for beings of the netherworld like him, it was a super tonic. Moreover, it was only a sliver, or else he wouldn't dare to swallow any more, or he would definitely explode. The Genesis tier was too strong, too strong. 1 inch, half an inch. Why couldn't he move forward? The Azura Demon Emperor turned around in shock, only to see that Ling Han's large hand had already grabbed him firmly, making him unable to move forward at all. Not bad, now you're more courageous. Ling Han said with a smile. Master, I'm innocent. The Azura Demon Emperor was originally in the form of smoke, and didn't have a physical body. He immediately stretched his body and hugged Ling Han's thigh. I was just muddled by greed, and my heart was blinded by lard. Master, just treat what I said as nonsense. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, You really want to swallow this mass of demonic qi? Please reward me, Master. The Azura Demon Emperor's face was filled with a fawning expression. Ling Han, don't be fooled by him. Shui Yenyu said. This Demon Emperor was too two-faced. The Azura Demon Emperor's heart instantly clenched. Ling Han seemed to have the intention to relent, but with Shui Yenyu's persuasion, this matter was about to be dropped. Alright, I'll bestow it to you, Ling Han said with a smile. Demonic qi was poison to him, and it would only bring harm and no benefit. He loosened his grip. The Azura Demon Emperor was overjoyed that he had regained his freedom. He immediately opened his mouth and swallowed that ball of demonic qi. His body was expanding as if he had become a balloon. However, he quickly shrunk back, and returned to his normal size. There didn't seem to be any difference, but one could clearly sense that the Azura Demon Emperor's aura was rapidly increasing. In an instant, he broke through the divine state and exuded an aura that was as vast as the ocean. Mountain River Tier, Low Extreme, Peak Stage. Ha 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 ha. The Azura Demon Emperor instantly laughed loudly, appearing to be very proud of himself. Ling Han, oh, Ling Han, you're really too stupid. You actually allowed me to recover my strength. Today, I'll show you what immortal level power is. Shui Yenyu was dumbfounded. Naturally, it wasn't because she was shocked by the Azura Demon Emperor's strength, but rather because he was so shameless. He actually changed his attitude faster than flipping the page of a book. Previously, he had still called her master, but now he was so shameless and arrogant. Did he have any shame? Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, I've recovered my strength to the peak stage of the low extreme of the mountain river tier. How did you know? The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't help but be surprised. It wasn't strange for him to know the level of immortal level, but how could he see through his cultivation level so easily? Just thinking about it made him feel strange, and gave him an ominous feeling. Ling Han sighed, and said, "Little Azura, how many years have you been here?" "Don't call me little brother, I'm the Azura Demon Emperor." The Azura Demon Emperor was flustered and exasperated. He was willing to be a little brother because a man could bow and submit when necessary. Did he think he was shameless, and born to be a lowly wretch? No. Ling Han continued, "You've become stupid after being locked up. Did you think that my strength wouldn't increase after so many years? You. The Azura Demon Emperor's expression finally changed drastically. This brat was a freak, and he couldn't be measured with common sense. Ling Han smiled faintly, and released his aura. Instantly, an aura that was far more powerful than the Azura Demon Emperor's surged out. "Master!" The Azura Demon Emperor immediately pounced at Ling Han's feet, hugged his thigh, and rubbed his face against it. "I've really missed you too much. One day without you feels like 3 years. Shui Yenyu grimaced. She was already completely speechless. "Weren't you quite fierce just then?" Ling Han asked slowly. Just then, that was because I had a split personality," the Azura Demon Emperor said seriously. "Master, you know, when people are locked up for a long time, they will become mentally deranged, and develop a second personality. This is what happened to me. However, don't worry, Master, I've already destroyed this personality. From now on, I'll be your most loyal dog. If you tell me to go east, I won't dare to go west." Ling Han stared at him, and said, "I've already given you 2 chances. If the Azura Demon Emperor could sweat, he would definitely be covered in cold sweat by now." However, he still wiped his forehead out of habit. After all, he had possessed the body of a human for a long time, and this was a habit. "Don't worry, Master. I definitely won't make the same mistake a 3rd time, he vowed solemnly. This time, he was really frightened by Ling Han. It had only been a few years, and Ling Han had advanced from the heaven tier to the immortal level. Moreover, he hadn't just advanced to the mountain river tier, but had reached the medium extreme. If this continued, wouldn't he become a Genesis tier in a few hundred or a few thousand years? There were no disadvantages to having such a master. Instead, there were only advantages. The Azura Demon Emperor definitely had an extremely realistic personality. His attitude instantly changed. As long as Ling Han could maintain this kind of progress, he was willing to completely submit and become an obedient dog. He knew that even as a dog, he would be an incredibly noble dog. Even people countless times stronger than him would have to be respectful to him. Ling Han nodded, and said, "This is the last chance. There definitely won't be a 3rd time." "Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master." The Azura Demon Emperor was overjoyed. Ling Han planned to completely subdue the Azura Demon Emperor because the characteristics of the Azura Demon Emperor were actually quite useful. For example, he could enter a puppet. "I'll leave this puppet to you. Possess it, and fight for me in the future." Ling Han summoned the puppet tiger. The Azura Demon Emperor didn't have any objections to possessing a human or a dog. He immediately accepted the order and burrowed into the puppet tiger. Instantly, this fierce tiger began to move. "Master, this is a consummate level vessel." He immediately became excited. One had to know that even at his peak, he was only in the medium extreme. He was still very, very far away from the consummate level. Not satisfied. Satisfied, 100% satisfied, 1000% satisfied. The Azura Demon Emperor was extremely excited. Ling Han nodded, and said, "As long as you obediently work for me, I can still give you Sun Moon tier and Heavenly Body tier vessels in the future. In fact, it's not impossible for me to obtain some Genesis tier demonic chi for you to swallow. Master, you're really too good to me. I'm willing to do anything for you." The Azura Demon Emperor floated out of the puppet tiger, and went to hug Ling Han's thigh again. This time, even if he had obtained such a powerful vessel, he didn't dare to have the slightest bit of disloyalty. This thing had been seized by Ling Han, his master was really too strong. He could even trample to death those at the consummate level. It was more refreshing to read on his phone. Chapter 1030. Ling Han grabbed Guoxiuwen. He had been knocked unconscious by Ling Han's 7-kill subduing soul technique, and he still hadn't woken up. The lower the cultivation level of this secret technique, the more powerful it would be. For those in the low extreme, it would be a piece of cake to directly kill them. He was slapped awake, and he opened his eyes abruptly. He was stunned. What was this place? How long had he been unconscious for him to leave the Earth's core island and appear in such an unfamiliar environment? You. When he saw Ling Han, he couldn't help but be terrified because Ling Han was completely fine. Did he not open the bottle? No, there were clearly fragments of the bottle in the distance, so he definitely opened it. Disappointed? Ling Han smiled, and said, "Tell me, what's the reason why I shouldn't kill you?" I'm also a victim, I was forced. Guoxiuwen said in a trembling voice, pushing all the blame onto Pei Ji. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Perhaps you were forced at first, but I don't feel a shred of regret from you now. You're no different from Pei Ji. Little Azura, kill him." The Azura Demon Emperor immediately entered the puppet tiger, raised its head, and said, "As you wish, master." Guoxiuwen was shocked and confused. This puppet tiger was personally made by him, and he had always sat on it, so it could be said that he knew everything about it. But now, this puppet actually spoke, almost scaring him to death. From his memory, he had never left this island, so how could he know about the netherworld? He only felt that it was inconceivable. You're also a puppeteer. He thought he understood. Ling Han was definitely a puppeteer countless times more powerful than him, which was why he could easily take away his puppet. Now, he even made the puppet speak, and it became incredibly intelligent, like a demonic tiger with intelligence. The Azura Demon Emperor pounced, and with a bite, Guoxiuwen's neck was bitten off. Under the impact of the destructive power, his divine sense was also destroyed, and he instantly died. "Stay beside me, and don't attack randomly," Ling Han ordered. The Azura Demon Emperor was overjoyed. Master was going to let him out. So touched. With a wave of Ling Han's hand, 2 humans and a tiger appeared in the workshop. "This is the immortal realm," the Azura Demon Emperor exclaimed in astonishment. Although he had already guessed that Ling Han had to have entered the immortal realm after learning that Ling Han was in the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, he was still extremely astonished when he personally experienced the completely different regulations of heaven and earth and the vast spiritual chi of the immortal realm. It had only been a few years, yet Ling Han had already advanced into the immortal level. In fact, he could even casually take out a vessel at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. This was a huge shock to him. "Lead the way," Ling Han ordered. "Yes, master." The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly nodded. This was a good opportunity for him to show his master just how loyal he was. He immediately pushed open the door and walked out. "Search every room," Ling Han said. Bam! The Azura Demon Emperor slammed open the door to the room next door. Aside from the tools and materials that littered the surroundings, there was only an empty platform in the middle. There was nothing on it, and there was no one inside, either. They retreated, and the Azura Demon Emperor slammed open another room. Ugh! Shui Yenyu immediately showed a pained expression, and turned around to vomit. The layout of this room was no different from the previous 2 rooms. There were tools and materials all around, and there was also a platform in the middle. However, there was a corpse that had been dismembered on the platform in this room. It was Fan Yong. He hadn't been made into a puppet yet, so his face retained the terror he had when he was alive. Anyone who saw him would shiver in fear. Ling Han even suspected that he was still alive when he was dismembered. He had to watch helplessly as his body was dismembered, his organs dug out, and every drop of blood drained. What kind of terror was this? No wonder his expression was so twisted. These animals. Shui Yanyu chided from the side. Ling Han waved his divine patterns of flame, and burned Fan Yong's corpse to ashes. Although he had a grudge against him, his crimes had been erased after death. Let's go. The Azura Demon Emperor obediently led the way. He knew that his master was currently in a very bad mood. His voice was icy cold, as if it had come from an icy cavern. Although this was very common for him, wasn't it just dismembered? There were more things in the netherworld that were 100, or even 1,000 times crueler than this. Peng, he crashed into the fourth room. There was a living person here. You, how did you come in? Huh? This is eldest senior brother's puppet tiger. Why is it with you? The person in the room was Dong Yulong. He was busy, and only turned around because he was disturbed. On the platform behind him, there was a corpse that was being processed. Blood flowed all over the platform. It was a female corpse. Her slender legs and arms had all been separated from her torso. Her body had also been cut open, and her organs were being dug out. This woman was Lu Ying. She actually hadn't breathed her last. Her eyes turned slightly, and she looked at Ling Han. Her lips moved a few times, but she couldn't make a single sound. However, Ling Han could guess what she wanted to say. Kill the animals here. Also, kill her and free her. Kill. Ling Han said coldly. The Azura Demon Emperor instantly pounced, charging toward Dong Yulong. Ong! A puppet wolf appeared, blocking the Azura Demon Emperor. This was shockingly also a puppet at the consummate level, and its battle prowess wasn't much inferior to the Azura Demon Emperor. Ling Han took a few steps forward, and his divine sense spread out like a net. Xiao, that puppet wolf disappeared without a trace. Pooh! Dong Yulong's expression was the same as Guoxiuwen's. His eyes were wide open, and his tongue was long. However, the Azura Demon Emperor had already pounced, and struck out with a claw. Pa! His entire head was smashed into pieces, and his headless body instantly collapsed. Ling Han's sword flew out, and extinguished the remaining life force of Lu Ying. She looked at him with gratitude, and slowly closed her eyes. He waved his hand again, and Lu Ying's body was burned to ashes. They entered the fifth room, and shockingly found another victim here. Yang Taicheng. This man had also been dismembered, and every part was soaked in a silver liquid. However, unlike Lu Ying, who still had a shred of life force left, he had been dead for a while. This should have happened today, because Ling Han had seen him in the morning. Towards Luo Wu and Fan Yong, Ling Han only had killing intent, and towards Lu Ying, Ling Han didn't have any good feelings either. After all, she had come to kill him. However, he admired Yang Taicheng very much. After all, there weren't many people who could let go of their likes and dislikes, and stick to their principles. Moreover, they had fought side by side, and had once trusted each other with their backs. Brother Yang, don't worry. I will definitely kill all of those animals, and let you rest in peace in the netherworld. Ling Han said solemnly. Then, he suddenly turned around, and said, Go back, maybe we can still save the others. Chapter 1032. The current Peiji was extremely strange. Up to his thighs, he was still a normal person, but starting from below, he was like the roots of an old tree. They were all intricate metal rods that propped him up high into the air, making him look like a giant. Ha 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 ha, how can I destroy you? He laughed loudly. The countless metal rods below him moved like a centipede, advancing toward Ling Han and the others. Everyone hurriedly scattered to avoid being knocked down by Peiji's attack. Ling Han used the annihilating dragon star arrow. Shio, shio, shio. Arrows of origin power shot out. Some of these origin power arrows were silver-white, some were crimson, and some were earth-yellow. The silver-white arrows were normal origin power arrows, the crimson arrows were divine patterns of flame, and the earth-yellow arrows were divine patterns of gravity. Peiji didn't dare to let these arrows hit him. He raised some legs and wove a dense net in front of him, blocking these origin power arrows. Not only that, but the attacks of others also couldn't break through this net. The difference in cultivation level was too big. He was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and what about Ling Han and the others? Fu Tian, unconscious. Yin Yuanxiang, late stage of the medium extreme, battle prowess also at the peak stage. Jin Zhihui, early stage of the medium extreme, battle prowess also at the early stage. Shui Yanyu, peak stage of the low extreme, battle prowess surpassing 1 star. Ling Han, early stage of the medium extreme, battle prowess surpassing 5 stars, the limit possibly reaching 6 stars. They combined weren't a match for Peiji. A bunch of brats dare to attack me? You're really seeking death. Peiji sneered. Ling Han's figure flashed, and shua, a net spread out. He had been using the crimson ground locking net before, and now it was completely activated. As the net spread out, it became larger and larger. This kind of treasure naturally had a lot of space. At its limit, it wouldn't be a problem for it to envelop a mountain, what more when Peiji was only 6 meters tall. Peiji didn't expect this, and the space here was limited, so he had nowhere to hide. He was instantly enveloped by the net. What? Why has my power dropped so much? He paled in shock. His cultivation level had actually dropped to the peak stage of the high extreme. It had been suppressed by an entire minor level. As a puppeteer, he wasn't known for his battle prowess. Thus, he was naturally a little flustered when his cultivation level was reduced by a small realm. Moreover, he didn't know what material the net was made of. He couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried, and it even affected his mobility. He hurriedly let out a low roar, and the female puppet immediately turned around and grabbed at the crimson ground locking net. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly chased after her, and said, "Damned bitch Wu, have a taste of my saber." He pulled out a saber that had been stabbed into his body, and slashed at her. This guy was a wretched villain. Once he let go of his dignity as an expert, he was truly shameless to the extreme. His mouth was full of vulgarities and vulgarities. The female puppet, however, simply pressed a hand behind her as she grabbed the crimson ground locking net with her other hand. She was a pseudo-sun moon tier being, so this grab was extraordinarily powerful. Instantly, a large section of the large net was lifted up. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor's saber also arrived, and it landed on her palm, releasing a loud boom. Everyone felt as if their eardrums were about to rupture. They couldn't hear anything else, and could only see a dazzling flash of light as the saber collided with the palm. Pang! The Azura Demon Emperor was actually forced back. Obviously, though these two puppets were pseudo-sun moon tier, the female puppet was stronger. Ta, 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 ta. Strange footsteps rang out, and more puppets of all shapes and sizes crawled out from various corners. Ha ha ha, kill all of these people. Peiji pointed at the net, his face filled with killing intent. Although he was forced into such a sorry state, and this made him angry and humiliated. There were at least a few hundred of these puppets, and there were even more surging out endlessly. According to Guoxiuwen, he had stayed here for more than 30,000 years, so Peiji had definitely stayed here for even longer. In such a long time, how many puppets had he created? This could completely be called an army. Though they were lacking in intelligence, they also had many advantages. They didn't have vital points, didn't know pain, and didn't fear death. At this time, Fu Tian had also woken up, but he was severely injured, and his battle prowess had dropped greatly. Everyone was apprehensive. With so many puppets, they could be crushed to death with their numbers alone. Ling Han roared, and launched a sudden attack. Shio, 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 shio. Once he charged out, he naturally became the main target of the puppets, and countless attacks were launched at him. There were sharp claws, blasts of sound, and black bullets of light. Ling Han was unafraid. These puppets were basically all in the low extreme of the mountain river tier, so no matter how many attacks were launched at him, he didn't even need to defend himself. He simply spread out his divine sense, and wherever he charged, the nearby puppets would disappear one by one. The nemesis of the puppets had arrived. His target was that female puppet. As long as he could capture her, the Azura Demon Emperor's battle prowess would be released, and suppressing Pei Ji would be a piece of cake. Quickly release this thing for me," Pei Ji said in exasperation. Over a dozen puppets grabbed onto the net, and all exerted force, wanting to open the net and release Pei Ji. Ling Han impulsively spread out his divine sense, and wrapped it around the female puppet. Then, naturally, it was done. Pu Pei Ji had just escaped from the net, and when he saw this scene, he was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. Previously, he hadn't noticed how the male puppet had disappeared, and now he finally saw the process. But to be honest, he was still incredibly confused, and had no idea what had happened. "Foot-legged old man, I'll kill you." The Azura Demon Emperor laughed loudly, and leaped towards Pei Ji. Pei Ji was shocked. He naturally knew what kind of abilities this puppet possessed, and hurriedly shouted, "Stop him." He glared hatefully at Ling Han, and felt that this brat was incredibly strange, as if he was fated to be his nemesis. One had to realize that the opponent's battle prowess at the consummate level of the mountain river tier had all been dealt with, and the remaining puppets were all useless chickens and dogs that couldn't be considered a threat at all. Yet, he had completed this unbelievable reversal. He was, after all, astute, and knew that he couldn't fight for a moment's pride. He immediately turned around and fled, saying, "Brat, if you want to chase after me, your companions are going to die." He laughed loudly, and fled as quickly as he could. Ling Han only hesitated slightly, and then turned around to help the others destroy the puppets. With a powerful helper like the Azura Demon Emperor, added with the fact that Ling Han was the nemesis of puppets, though there was an absurd number of puppets here, and they surged out like a tide, they were also like leeks, being harvested in batches as they appeared. After 15 minutes, the puppets finally ran out of reinforcements. Killing one meant that there would truly be one less puppet. Chapter 1033. With Ling Han, the nemesis of puppets, and the Azura Demon Emperor, the pseudo-Sun Moon tier, elite, guarding them, they finally wiped out these puppets. Yin Yuanxiang, Fu Tian, and Jin Zhihui all sighed with emotion. If it weren't for Ling Han, they definitely wouldn't have been able to escape this time. No matter how freakishly strong they were, how could they be a match for pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets? Even Yang Taiching had suffered a calamity. Speaking of Yang Taiching, everyone sighed. This person could adhere to his principles, which was really rare in this world. Once the battle ended, Fu Tian began to heal his wounds. He had forcibly fought before, not wanting to be a burden to others. His personality could be said to be very competitive. "Master, should we chase after that broken leg guy?" the Azura Demon Emperor asked. Ling Han thought for a moment, then shook his head, and said, "No need. He's the local tyrant here, and has been here for tens of thousands of years. He definitely won't let us find him. But if we don't find him, he will continue to do evil," Shui Yanyu said. Ling Han said, "Then let's search here first to see if that old thief left behind any clues." Actually, we don't know anything about this old thief at all. Only by knowing oneself and the enemy can we act accordingly. Master is wise. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly flattered. Ling Han threw out a puppet bear, and said, "Possess this puppet." The Azura Demon Emperor didn't understand. Wasn't his puppet stronger now, reaching pseudo-Sun Moon tier, so its battle prowess was who knew how much stronger than the puppet bear. However, when he saw the disgust in Ling Han's eyes, he instantly understood. As a human, his master naturally hated turning humans into puppets. He didn't dare to resist, and hurriedly possessed the puppet bear. In any case, this kind of thing didn't have a life or will, so it was very easy for him to change back and forth. Ling Han burned the two human-shaped puppets with divine flames. Previously, it was to deal with Pei Ji, so now it was naturally to let the dead rest in peace. The few of them began to search in this workshop. Ling Han didn't have much hope at first, but they found a diary here that revealed the reason and process of Pei Ji's path to becoming a pervert. As it turns out, the man and woman that he made into puppets are his senior brother and senior sister. All three of them are disciples of the same puppet master. He always had a crush on senior sister, but senior sister married his senior brother. He didn't show it on the surface, but after his master died, he poisoned the two of them. After controlling them, he turned them into puppets. No wonder the male puppet's body is covered in swords, it's because Pei Ji hates him too much. What a pervert, turning the woman he likes into a puppet. The diary also clearly described the process of him making his senior brother and senior sister. The insults, reprimands, anger, fear, and every detail was very detailed, as if he was constantly reliving it. I was betrayed by my own junior brother, and personally witnessed myself being made into a puppet. What kind of darkness is this? Shui Yenyu said with a shake of her head, filled with fury. That's why you can't just rely on talent when taking a disciple. The most important factor is still character. Otherwise, it's equivalent to raising a wolf by your side. Ling Han was also very emotional, causing the Azura Demon Emperor to panic. Master wasn't hinting at him, was he? Wang. Right at this moment, a sword light flashed, piercing toward Ling Han's back. This strike was fast and urgent, and it was far too unexpected. The battle had already ended, and only the few people who had fought alongside him were left. Why would someone suddenly attack Ling Han? Pooh! This sword pierced deeply into Ling Han's body. He roared loudly, and turned around to deliver a palm strike. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor also reacted, and hurriedly released a bear's roar, swiping his claws at the ambusher. The ambusher didn't have time to draw her sword, so she could only loosen her grip. Her figure flipped, and she instantly retreated 20 or 30 meters, descending like a cloud. She was none other than Yin Yuanxiang. Ling Han. Shui Yenyu exclaimed in shock, and hurriedly caught Ling Han. Tears involuntarily flowed from her eyes. This sword had pierced through Ling Han's body, leaving only the hilt outside. Meanwhile, Jin Zhihui was both furious and shocked, and he roared at Yin Yuanxiang, What are you doing? Only Fu Tian was still sitting on the ground, but it could be felt that his muscles were involuntarily tensing up. Meanwhile, Ling Han stared at Yin Yuanxiang, and said in a raspy voice, "So you're the true culprit on the ship. Why do you say that?" Yin Yuanxiang's previous cautious expression was replaced by one of pride. Her aura also underwent an earth-shattering transformation, instantly rising to the consummate level. Ling Han coughed, and his face became even paler. He said, before Zhou Gaoyang died, he once said that he wasn't the culprit. Yin Yuanxiang's attack had succeeded, so she wasn't in a hurry now. She said, in order to survive, he naturally said whatever he wanted. Ling Han shook his head, and said, if he was the culprit, he would have only begged for mercy, and not argued that he wasn't the culprit. Yin Yuanxiang was slightly surprised, and asked, so you started to suspect me? Indeed. Ling Han nodded, and said, I was thinking that since the Dark Night Hall could send one assassin, why couldn't they send two? One in the open, and one in the dark. Yin Yuanxiang hesitated for a moment, then laughed loudly, and said, that's right. At this point, there's no need for me to hide anymore. I'm indeed an assassin from the Dark Night Hall. However, don't even think about buying time. That sword was tainted with lethal poison, and even cultivators at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier would die if they were struck by it. Shui Yenyu was astonished. She was confident in Ling Han's recovery ability, but poison was a different matter. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "It's good that you admit it. I was only suspecting before, but now I've finally confirmed it." He straightened his body, and released his left arm. However, the sword that had stabbed into his body fell to the ground. As it turned out, the sword hadn't stabbed into his body at all. Instead, it was wedged between his arm and his body. What? Yin Yuanxiang's expression changed drastically, and she said in disbelief, "I clearly stabbed your heart. That spot definitely couldn't be wrong, unless..." She stared at Ling Han, and said, "Unless you were already prepared, and moved the bones in your body." Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, "Since I suspected that there was an assassin from the Dark Night Hall here, how could I not be on guard?" "But why did you suspect me?" Yin Yuanxiang was confused, and said, "I clearly used a secret technique to suppress my cultivation level. Even low-level Sun-Moon tier elites might not be able to pierce through it, to say nothing of you." Ling Han nodded, and said, "You indeed concealed yourself very well. However, when you were surrounded by the puppets, you still used a power that far surpassed your cultivation level. This made me suspicious and wary." Yin Yuanxiang was stunned. The situation had been so chaotic just then, yet Ling Han still had the leisure to take care of the entire situation. What kind of monster was he? It couldn't be helped. After all, Ling Han's divine sense was far more powerful than ordinary cultivators at the medium extreme. "Since I can't kill you with the simple method, I can only use the difficult method." Yin Yuanxiang chuckled coldly. She drew another sword, and a sinister aura radiated from her body. She was an elite at the consummate level. Chapter 1034. Ling Han. Shui Yenyu's worry turned to joy, and she involuntarily hugged Ling Han tightly from behind. She had almost been scared to death just then. Jin Zhihui also breathed a sigh of relief, but his eyes were fixed on Yin Yuanxiang, and it was clear that he was extremely furious. Basically, what everyone hated the most was being betrayed. They had gone through thick and thin together. They had battled snakes, fought pirates, and fought puppets together. It could be said that they had forged a deep bond of friendship. However, Yin Yuanxiang had betrayed them at this time. It was as if a knife had been stabbed in their backs. "Master, let me tear this bitch to pieces," the Azura Demon Emperor requested. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Fine, you go." The Azura Demon Emperor roared, and immediately pounced toward Yin Yuanxiang. He had been imprisoned for a long time, and now was the time to fight to loosen his muscles and bones. In any case, he was possessing the body of a puppet, so if it broke, he could just change to another one. In any case, his master had plenty of them. He was only afraid of spiritual attacks. Just trash. Yin Yuanxiang raised her sword and attacked. She was really very powerful. Not only was she at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, but she was also at the peak stage of the consummate level. Although she didn't have the ability to fight those at a higher cultivation level, her battle prowess was the best. As the saying went, when there was no tiger in the mountain, the monkey would be king. Otherwise, if Yang Taiching was here, she could only continue to endure. Peng, Peng, Z. The Azura Demon Emperor was forced back again, and finally slid to the feet of Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out his foot and stepped on it, and only then did he stop sliding. "Can you do it or not?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Master, she's a bit strong," the Azura Demon Emperor said with a bitter expression. This puppet bear only had the battle prowess of the late stage of the consummate level. There was a sub-minor level difference, and he was completely suppressed by her. "Ha ha ha ha." Yin Yuanxiang laughed loudly, and said, "Who told you to pretend to be kind and righteous? You clearly had a pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppet, yet you discarded it. Pay, you've already used it once, and you still care about using it a second or third time. Keep going." I'll cover you from behind, Ling Han said as he kicked the Azura Demon Emperor. The puppet bear instantly flew into the air and descended toward Yin Yuanxiang. 100 Ghost Sword Technique. Yin Yuanxiang shouted as she brandished her sword. Numerous ghosts actually appeared and charged toward the Azura Demon Emperor. Ling Han also sprang into action. He was currently activating the Crimson Ground Locking Net. As long as he could capture Yin Yuanxiang, her battle prowess would drop to the high extreme, and she would be easily captured. In your dreams. Yin Yuanxiang's figure swam about in an incomparably strange manner, and Ling Han was completely unable to capture her movements. If they were prepared, it would be very difficult for a treasure like the Crimson Ground Locking Net to be effective. Is that so? Ling Han smiled faintly and suddenly unleashed the 7-kill subduing soul art. The divine soul attack was invisible, and its speed was ridiculously fast. It was basically impossible to dodge, and one could only take it head-on. It was a competition of the strength of the divine soul of both sides, and which was stronger and more tenacious. Yin Yuanxiang was instantly struck. Her sword momentum faltered, and her figure also faltered for a moment. However, she was at the peak stage of the consummate level, after all, so this momentary lapse in concentration was only a matter of a moment. There was no time for Ling Han to draw her into the Black Tower. In fact, there wasn't even enough time for him to cast the net. However, right at this moment, the Azura Demon Emperor pounced over. He didn't swing his claws to attack. Instead, he gave Yin Yuanxiang a bear hug, a real bear hug. One had to realize that he was only one sub-minor level weaker than Yin Yuanxiang, so this momentary lapse in concentration was more than enough for him to do this. Master, I've caught her, the Azura Demon Emperor shouted excitedly. This was an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. When he was at his peak, he could only kneel before such a being. He didn't think that he would be able to match her now. Let go. Yin Yuanxiang paled in shock. The Azura Demon Emperor was indeed unable to injure her, but Ling Han was activating the Crimson Ground Locking Net. She was even more powerful, and under her full strength, the Azura Demon Emperor's arms began to twist unbelievably. Even his bones were deformed from the strain. If it were a normal living being, they would definitely be screaming in agony. How could they muster any strength under such pain? However, the Azura Demon Emperor didn't feel anything at all. He simply hugged Yin Yuanxiang tightly to buy time for Ling Han. Whoosh! The net spread open, covering them from head to toe. Instantly, Yin Yuanxiang and the Azura Demon Emperor's cultivation level dropped by a minor level. Yin Yuanxiang unleashed her might, and one burst of sword chi after another flew out from her body, slicing at the Azura Demon Emperor. She was stronger than the Azura Demon Emperor in the end, so she naturally had the upper hand. She was able to slice through the Azura Demon Emperor's body until it was a gruesome sight. Fortunately, the puppet bear had been tempered by a secret technique, so its frame was especially sturdy. Otherwise, it would have been reduced to dust long ago. Ling Han drew his bow and activated the ultimate arrow. When the arrow was aimed at her, Yin Yuanxiang instantly felt a chill run down her spine. She felt as if she would definitely die if Ling Han fired this arrow. At this moment, she didn't have the time to think about what kind of archery technique this was or why it was so powerful. There was only one thought left in her mind, and that was to escape from this net. She definitely couldn't allow herself to be hit. Otherwise, she would undoubtedly die. Let go, let go. Yin Yuanxiang's beautiful face was twisted, and she no longer had the allure of a beautiful woman. She was truly going to use all her strength, and she desperately used her origin power and life force to drag the Azura Demon Emperor and the net along as she ran. It had to be said that she was really fast. However, no matter how fast she was, could she compare to the annihilating Dragon Star arrow? Xiao! The sharp arrow pierced through the air and shot toward Yin Yuanxiang. Pooh! Without any suspense, the arrow pierced through the net and struck Yin Yuanxiang's chest. Blood instantly spurted from her wound, and the arrow pierced through her body before striking the puppet bear. Pang! The Azura Demon Emperor couldn't help but let go of the bear's arm under the immense force of the impact, and the human and bear finally separated. Brat, I'm going to kill you. Pang! Yin Yuanxiang was just about to shout a threat, but her chest suddenly exploded. Her face was filled with shock, and she lowered her head to look at her heart that had already exploded. A thought flashed through her mind, wasn't this the explosive arrow created by the Dark Night Hall? How laughable. As an assassin of the Dark Night Hall, she died to a weapon created by her own clan. Was this retribution? She hadn't even finished her thought when her whole body collapsed forward, and her soul dissipated. The Azura Demon Emperor turned into smoke and floated out, saying, Master, another puppet has been destroyed. First, it was the puppet tiger, and now it was the puppet bear. It hadn't even been a day, and he had already destroyed 2 precious carriers. Ling Han casually tossed out a puppet wolf, and said, It's fine. Change to another one. He put away the crimson ground-locking net. This was an extremely useful treasure before he reached the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. He really had to thank the Luo clan. If Luo Hongdao knew what Ling Han was thinking at this moment, he would definitely be seething with anger. How could it not be useful? Did he know how many generations of the Luo clan's savings had been spent on it? Search this place thoroughly. Don't leave anything behind. It was more refreshing to read on a cell phone. Chapter 1036. Humph. The regulations of heaven and earth here are extremely chaotic, so it's really a good place for a decisive battle, Zhu Yueyun said with a cold chuckle. Ho Yang, if you don't want to die here, then hand that thing over. Ho Yang laughed loudly, and said, Zhu Yueyun, are you trying to scare me? We're both at the peak stage of the low extreme, and our battle prowess can surpass 2 stars. If we were to fight to the death, it's still unknown who would emerge victorious. I only know that if you don't hand that thing over, I'll kill you, Zhu Yueyun said in a menacing voice. What's the point? This thing can't be opened at all, Ho Yang advised. Are you going to risk your life and tens of thousands of years of cultivation for an unknown thing? Zhu Yueyun flared up in rage, and said, You and I discovered that thing together, and we agreed to study it together. However, you took advantage of me and escaped with that thing. If I don't kill you, how can I swallow this humiliation? Ho Yang chuckled, and said, I didn't expect you to be so naive either. No wonder you've always been alone, and you've spent all your time on cultivation. How foolish. Die. Zhu Yueyun roared in rage, and he immediately attacked. Boom. A terrifying light instantly erupted in the sky, and a series of shockwaves surged over. The sea was churned, and waves that were several thousand meters tall rose into the air. They were like mountains crashing into each other. Fuck. When the king of hell fights, the little brats suffer. Ling Han gritted his teeth. They were far too unlucky. The 2 heavenly body tier elites had chosen to fight in the sky above them instead of elsewhere. Weren't they just going to be caught in the crossfire? However, now that things had come to this, he could only face them head-on. Ling Han stood at the bow of the ship, and he faced the wind and waves with his sword in hand. When a huge wave crashed over, he roared loudly and slashed out with his sword. He forcefully slashed open a crack in the wave, allowing their ship to pass through. Shwa, shwa, shwa. He continued to slash out with his sword. The wave was far too thick, and he could only slash out a crack that was 30 meters deep. He had to continuously use his sword to slash through it. Finally, the boat passed through the big wave. Ling Han was so tired that he could barely lift his hands. This seawater was extremely strange. A single drop was as heavy as a mountain, so how terrifying would a wave be when it crashed over like this? Moreover, this wave was created by an elite of the heavenly body tier, so it naturally contained a sliver of the might of the heavenly body tier. It was already very rare for Ling Han to be able to dispel it, so it would be strange if he wasn't exhausted. Boom boom boom, but before Ling Han could even catch his breath, he saw rows and rows of waves surge up one after another, crashing towards them. A quick count revealed that there were at least a few hundred waves. Fuck. Ling Han wanted to give up, and directly stored the boat into the Black Tower. He and Shui Yanyu would first hide in the sea, and when the battle in the sky was over, they would swim back to the surface of the sea, draw out the boat, and start sailing again. However, how rare was a battle between heavenly body tiers? Observing it would definitely be of great help to his own cultivation. Therefore, Ling Han gritted his teeth and endured. He continued to unleash 10,000 techniques return to one, slashing apart the waves. Fortunately, his cultivation level had improved greatly, and so had his power. Though the power of 10,000 techniques return to one had decreased considerably, the consumption of his power had also decreased considerably, so he could continue to endure. Of course, more importantly, it was still his powerful physique and astonishing stamina. Otherwise, in such a high-intensity battle, ordinary mountain river tier cultivators would have long since become numb, unable to even lift their arms. But Ling Han still persisted, and in this kind of battle, his willpower was fully tempered, causing his fighting spirit to soar. There was a kind of heroism that he could battle even against a heavenly body tier elite. However, the two elites in the sky were also becoming more and more enraged as they fought, and they were both fighting for real. Layers of dark clouds rolled over, blocking out the sun, and in another moment, the sky was filled with fiery clouds, as if they wanted to burn the sky into ashes, and even the sea was about to be boiled. The heavenly body tier was really too strong. Ling Han only felt that he was like an ant in front of this kind of power. No, he was even inferior to an ant. If either of these two people wanted to kill him, they didn't even need to move, and could kill him with a single look. Power. This is true power. Ling Han yearned in his heart, and he felt his whole body become excited. He couldn't see the battle in the sky at all, as the two elites flew into the sky and dove into the ground, unleashing their full battle prowess. The sky was burning, and the sea was boiling. This was practically hell on earth. Fortunately, the two elites had already moved far away from their original positions as they battled. Otherwise, with the intensity of this battle, the shockwaves from their battle definitely wouldn't be something that Ling Han could deal with. Boom! Under the sea, an incredibly thick pillar of light suddenly soared into the sky. It shot into the sky, and it could probably be clearly seen from thousands of kilometers away. Zhu Yueyun, we've fought our way to an ancient ruin, Ho Yang said with a smile. Why don't you go down and explore it? I won't fight with you over it. Bullshit, that's only a residence of a sun-moon tier elite. How can it compare to that chest? Zhu Yueyun angrily rebuked. In any case, it can't be opened, so it has no value at all. Then why are you keeping it? Give it to me. I like these kinds of strange things. Scram! The two of them battled fiercely again, and this time, the commotion was even greater. Blood spilled from both of them, instantly dyeing the sky red. It transformed into a boundless rain of blood that was filled with a terrifying killing intent. The creatures in the sea were all extremely unlucky, and they were directly killed by this rain of blood. This was the blood of a heavenly body tier elite. Just a single drop was like a meteor crashing into the sea. It was incredibly terrifying. Ling Han had naturally already drawn Shui Yanyu and the ship into the Black Tower. He himself also hid in the Black Tower, drifting along with the waves. He was swept into the sea at one moment, and then lifted into the sky at the next. The Black Tower was like a mustard seed, and even super gravity couldn't affect it. In other words, it was impervious to all techniques, and the regulations here were completely ineffective against it. Shio! A speck of light descended from the sky. Ling Han's eyes were sharp, and he immediately discovered that it was a white jade chest. With a thud, it fell into the sea, and then quickly sank. Is this the treasure that the two heavenly body tier elites are fighting over? He couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. He naturally couldn't snatch the treasure from the hands of heavenly body tier elites, yet this treasure had been sent flying. This gave him a chance. However, it was a little far away. Without waiting for Ling Han to exit the Black Tower, he saw two figures descend from the sky almost at the same time. They dove into the water, and quickly chased after that jade chest. As they chased, they were still battling, both wanting to be in front. However, the gravity here was too strong, and the jade chest sank very quickly. Ling Han very soon lost sight of the chest, and the two elites also instantly disappeared before his eyes. The Black Tower floated and sank, and no one knew. Ling Han's mind raced, and he finally made up his mind. He suddenly appeared from the Black Tower, and suddenly, a terrifying gravity assaulted him, immediately pulling him down to the bottom of the sea. This was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 1037. It would be best if he could obtain that jade box. If he couldn't, Ling Han also wanted to explore the place where the light beam came from. After hearing about the Star Sea's history, Ling Han was very interested in the bottom of the sea. With his good luck, he might be able to find treasures or inheritances from outside the galaxy. The two elites had also said that the light beam was the reappearance of a sun-moon tier's abode, which was why such a phenomenon occurred. They weren't interested, but Ling Han was. He would find the jade box first, and then explore the abode. 30 meters, 300 meters, several thousand meters. Ling Han continued to sink deeper and deeper into the sea. As he sank deeper and deeper, the light in the surroundings also became dimmer and dimmer. However, unlike other regions of the sea, this place was only dimmer, but there was still light all along. This was because the gravity here was too strong, causing the refraction of light to undergo an unbelievable change. It went down layer by layer, unable to refract back to the surface. And Ling Han also felt the pressure. The water pressure was too terrifying. There was an inexplicable rule here. If you scooped up the seawater, you would find that there was nothing strange about the seawater, but once you entered the sea, each drop of seawater was as heavy as a mountain. With the power of the mountain river tier, you could easily hold up a few large mountains, but each drop of seawater was as heavy as a mountain. That was too terrifying. More importantly, the deeper you sank, the heavier the water pressure. It was no longer a problem of mountains, but practically a star. When cultivators fell into the sea, they had to put up an origin power shield, or they would be crushed into a bloody mess. No wonder no one could stay in the sea for a long time, because origin power would eventually be exhausted, and when that time came, it would be a dead end. At first, Ling Han thought that even if he sank to the bottom, he would be able to walk to the shore after a few years, but now that he thought about it, he was too naive. Of course, Ling Han was no ordinary person. His physique was too strong, at least for now, he could still resist. However, his bones were already making explosive cracking sounds, obviously under great pressure. Secondly, he still had the Black Tower, so even if his origin power was exhausted, he could hide in it to recover. When they reached a depth of 10,000 feet, the place finally turned into darkness. 1001, 2002, 3003. Ling Han was still sinking. If others were to find out about this, they would definitely turn pale with fright. Although everyone came to this sea area to search for the lost treasure, they would usually only search in the shallow sea and the middle sea. The limit was 3,000 feet. Beyond this depth, it was called the deep sea. The deep sea was far too dangerous. Merely the water pressure alone was enough to cause the majority of mountain river tier cultivators to collapse. Moreover, there were terrifying demonic beasts in such deep waters, and they could easily take your life at any moment. In such an environment, how much strength can a martial artist display? 1,600, 1,700, 1,008. When Ling Han descended to a depth of 2,000 zhang, his surroundings actually lit up. Those were the fish in the sea. The scales on their bodies actually glowed. When they swam together in a group, it seemed as though the surrounding space was lit up. It was bizarre and dazzling. 2,500, 2,800. At this point, even Ling Han's godly bones couldn't hold on any longer. He had to circulate his origin power to resist the pressure, but his origin power was being expended at an abnormally fast pace. He took out a true origin stone and absorbed it as he resisted the pressure. 3,000 zhang. Finally, Ling Han sank to the bottom of the sea. The seabed wasn't flat. Instead, it was like a mountainous region, full of ups and downs. Many rocks were also glowing, just like those fish from before. This was a magnificent world. If it weren't for the fact that the water pressure was too great, Ling Han really wanted to summon Shui Yanyu and admire this beautiful scenery together. Unfortunately, Shui Yanyu didn't have a physique like his, and she was only at the peak stage of the low extreme. It was impossible for her to resist such terrifying pressure. If she came out, she would be directly crushed into a bloody pulp. In the distance, there was a dazzling beam of light. Even though he was very far away, he could still see it clearly. It was that sun-moon tier abode. Ling Han didn't hesitate, and swam in the direction of the beam of light. As for that jade box, he could only rely on his luck. Because the two heavenly body tier elites had come down before him, with their abilities, they had definitely searched a few rounds. If they should find it, they would definitely have found it. Thus, he could only leave it to fate. If the heavens favored him, who knew, maybe that jade box would appear at his feet. He walked with difficulty. At the bottom of the sea, his speed dropped to rock bottom. His clumsy appearance would make anyone want to laugh. Just like that, he slowly advanced. On the surface of the sea, he would only need about 10 minutes to complete the journey, but he spent almost half a day. Finally, a stretch of ruins appeared in front of him, but a dazzling light exploded from a corner. This should be a mountain gate, right? He could clearly see that this should have been a mountain, but now the majority of the mountain peak had been shaved off, and more of it had sunk to the bottom of the sea. There was very little part of it that was submerged in water. In the middle of the mountain stood a stone pillar. It was at least 30 meters thick and 300 meters tall, and it was this stone pillar that was emitting such a dazzling light. And beside the stone pillar, there was a cave entrance, from which a faint light leaked out. However, because the stone pillar was really too dazzling, this cave appeared very dim in comparison. Ling Han swam over, wanting to enter the cave to explore, but suddenly, a wave crashed over, and a giant shark shockingly appeared in front of him. There were circles of golden patterns on its body. Golden pattern shark, an existence at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. This golden pattern shark also discovered Ling Han, and a sneer actually appeared on its face. Having reached the height of the mountain river tier, demonic beasts naturally had long since developed intelligence. In its eyes, Ling Han was naturally so weak that he wasn't even worth mentioning. However, with a shake of its tail, it swam over like an arrow, opened its giant mouth, and bit at Ling Han. With a crack, it closed its mouth, but a confused expression appeared on its face because it didn't bite anything in its mouth. This insignificant human had disappeared. It circled around the surroundings, and finally gave up on the idea of continuing to search, and instead swam towards the cave entrance. It had also been attracted by this pillar of light. However, the clash between the two heavenly body tier elites had scared it to the point of wetting its pants, so how would it dare to run out? Only when it didn't discover the two powerful auras for a long time did it gather its courage and swim over. There were many creatures that had the same idea as it. A tortoise, a crab, a seahorse, and an octopus appeared one after another. The strength of these demonic beasts should be about the same, so they didn't start fighting. Instead, after facing each other for a while, they all communicated with their divine sense, and entered the cave one after another. After entering, these demonic beasts all exclaimed in surprise, because there was actually no water in the cave, but rather an extremely dry space. Chapter 1038. This is the abode of a human almighty, the tortoise said. No, 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 this should be a mountain gate, but most of the area has been destroyed, leaving only this place, the seahorse said. It must be an important place for treasures, the other demonic beasts said in unison. Both of them used their divine senses to communicate, so they skipped the language barrier and could communicate directly. Human treasures might not be useful to us, the crab said. He was a ghost-faced crab, on his shell was a pattern that looked like a malicious spirit. Right now, he was in human form, but his pair of large pincers still maintained their original appearance. To demonic beasts, their bodies were divine weapons. This was a gift from the heavens. Of course, they didn't mind having a few more high-level divine weapons. Hee, then you can leave. I don't mind using the human race's treasures, the large prawn said. He was a black armored prawn, and his entire body was pitch black. His carapace was incredibly hard, and it was comparable to godly metal of the same level. He had also transformed into a human form, and his body was covered in a thick layer of black armor, which was formed from his carapace. This was a residence built by humans, so it was not suitable for their huge bodies. Moreover, it was not an aquatic environment, so it was naturally most suitable for them to transform into human form. Ghost-faced Crab snorted coldly and said, I don't need you to tell me what to do. All right. There might be hidden dangers here. Let's find the treasures first before deciding how to split them. Octopus said. She was the only female. She had gray hair that was combed into dozens of braids. But upon closer inspection, each braid was actually a feeler, gently waving about. Gray Cloud Seal, alright, let's see if there are any treasures here. The sea demons reached a consensus and started searching. Too much time has passed. Many things have turned into ashes. Damn it. This is the constellation illusion spirit grass, a level 5 godly medicine. As long as there's enough of it, I can use it to break through to the sun-moon tier. This is a miraculous light stone. It can be used to refine divine bones. It's a pity that it's already turned to ash. Otherwise, it would be able to increase the defensive power of my armor by a whole realm. Heavens, this is the 4 Emperor pill. These sea demons continuously released cries of alarm and misery. They were shocked at how many treasures were hidden here and how precious they were. However, they also felt incomparable heartache, because they had all turned into ashes, not a single one remaining intact. This treasure room was divided into many small rooms. They searched through them one by one until they came to the last room. There was only a single stone there. It was extremely ordinary. This was the first reaction of the sea demons. It was really too ordinary, without the slightest bit of luster. It was the kind of existence that no one would take a second look at if it was thrown on the ground. But the problem was, to be able to be placed in the treasure room, could it really be ordinary? However, the treasures in the other rooms were all at the sun-moon tier, yet it just so happened to be an ordinary-looking stone in this room. Who wouldn't be suspicious? What exactly is this thing? The sea demons were all curious. Let's study it first. There's no need to fight before we know how to use it, said Ghostface Crab. But, all the demons gathered around. Because they had already reached a consensus, no one dared to make a move. Otherwise, they would become the target of everyone else. But this stone was really very ordinary, and it was very irregular, as if it had been knocked off from some big rock. They knocked on it a few times, touched it a few times, but there was no reaction. They attacked, but this time, all of their expressions changed. That was because when their attacks landed, it was as if they were hitting air. There was actually no effect, and it didn't even budge in the slightest. Though I don't know what other uses this stone has, merely its ability to absorb attacks is too frightening, the gray cloud octopus said in shock. This stone slab was not as simple as being tough. Rather, it could absorb attacks, and this was the most terrifying aspect of it. All the sea demons looked greedy. Even if this stone slab had no other uses, merely its ability to absorb attacks was already nature-defying. Schwa! In that instant, a few hands grabbed at the stone slab at the same time. Now that they knew that the stone slab had the ability to absorb attacks, they naturally all wanted to obtain it. When the time came, with the stone slab's protection, their defenses would definitely increase by a few times. All of you, get lost. It's mine. These sea demons all roared, and then began to fight. This was naturally a chaotic battle. Every sea demon's goal was to snatch the stone slab, and they had no intention of killing their enemies. However, as long as there was a chance to snatch the stone slab, they would immediately be surrounded and attacked. Thus, even if there was a sea demon here that was slightly stronger, they would not be able to gain the upper hand in such a chaotic situation. Pang! But at this moment, that golden-patterned shark's body suddenly exploded. This gave the other sea demons a fright. What was going on? No one had used any killing moves against him, so how did he suddenly die? At this moment, they saw a figure appear, already grabbing at that stone slab. It was Ling Han. Previously, he did not linger at all, and directly entered the Black Tower, but was swallowed by the golden-patterned shark along with the seawater. Just now, he appeared from the Black Tower, and used his full power, instantly smashing the golden-patterned shark into pieces. Even if it was a demonic beast, its organs were still extremely soft. Human. Damn it. The other sea demons were all shocked and furious. Though they belonged to different races, and definitely could not be considered friendly with each other, most of them would even attack each other, they were all sea demons, and when encountering an external enemy, they would naturally unite against a common enemy. Moreover, Ling Han still wanted to snatch the stone slab. They all attacked together, using octopus tentacles, prawn crab claws, and tortoise claws, all of them attacking Ling Han. He was only in the early stage of the medium extreme, so he was completely insignificant. Though they did not know what method he had used to kill the golden-patterned shark, there definitely would not be a second time. Pang! Their attacks all landed on Ling Han's back. 5 attacks simultaneously blasted over, all of them at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Most likely, any medium extreme would be smashed to pieces. However, though Ling Han spat out a mouthful of blood, his figure accelerated, and he grabbed the stone slab in his hand. What? The 5 sea demons were all stunned. How was this possible? He was merely in the medium extreme, so to say nothing of their combined attacks, just one of them was enough to smash this human into pieces. How was it that he only spat out a mouthful of blood? It was said that the physique of demonic beasts was tough, but looking at it now, this human was more like a demonic beast. Ling Han landed, and only managed to steady himself after staggering a few steps. He felt a searing pain on his back. Though he possessed a physique on the level of level 3 godly metal, being attacked by the battle prowess of 5 consummate level cultivators at the same time still made him feel incredibly uncomfortable. He couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood, and then, he spat out another 2 mouthfuls of blood, and only then did he feel slightly better. It really fucking hurts. Ling Han said in his mind. However, this stone slab was finally in his possession. Even if a heavenly body tier came, he would not worry that it would be snatched away by him. Sorry, I'll be taking this. Chapter 1040. If Pei Ji was still at his peak, even if he couldn't dodge this arrow, he would at least be able to avoid his vitals. However, he was ganged up on by the 5 great demonic beast elites, and was already heavily injured, his battle prowess dropping greatly, so how could he dodge this arrow? He patted his chest somewhat blankly, then pointed at Ling Han, and said, "Brat, I'll definitely tear you to pieces." Pa! Before the word, tear, left his mouth, his chest suddenly exploded, and he would never be able to utter the last word. His face filled with unwillingness, he collapsed onto the ground with a loud bang, blood flowing all over the ground. This treasure trove was obviously extremely sturdy. The previous battle didn't damage it in the slightest, and now, the blood of a mountain river tier cultivator naturally couldn't damage it either. 10,000 Shadows Clone Technique. Ling Han said randomly, and shoo, he entered the Black Tower. Damn it. The four great demonic beasts were all enraged. Previously, they had been tricked by Ling Han, and now they had allowed him to slip away for no rhyme or reason. This made them feel extremely embarrassed. What kind of movement technique is this? Why is it so strange? We've really been tricked. This old human dog isn't in cahoots with that puppy, but enemies. Damn it, we've been used, or else without us, that puppy definitely couldn't have killed the old dog. We've been tricked. The five demonic beasts were all furious, but now that Ling Han had disappeared without a trace, they could only howl helplessly. After being angry for a while, they left on their own. The strange phenomenon here was shocking, and it might attract even stronger demonic beasts, and by then, they might be fated to be devoured. Ling Han also exited the Black Tower, leaving the treasure trove, and then drifted with the flow. He once again entered the Black Tower, and began to study that mysterious stone slab. Small Tower, do you know what this is? Small Tower's figure appeared. It shook lightly, and said, "This is a primordial stone." Ling Han only asked with the mentality of trying, and didn't think that Small Tower would really know, causing him to be startled for a moment, and then said, "Be more specific." Small Tower humphed, and then said, "At the beginning of the world, this was the most ancient batch of stones, and was derived from the primal chaos source rock." Ling Han knew about the primal chaos source rock. Back when he was still in the lower realm, he had obtained a large piece, and the Azura Demon Emperor could not forget about it. He had even heavily tricked him. "Then it must be an incredible treasure," he said excitedly. "I'm sorry, other than being slightly older and sturdier, the primordial stone doesn't have any special abilities. It's only used to record historical data," Small Tower immediately countered. Ah! Ling Han was instantly disappointed. He had risked being beaten up to snatch something back, but it couldn't even be called a treasure. "Wait a minute." Ling Han immediately said, "That's not right. This stone is impervious to all kinds of energy and can absorb all kinds of energy. How could it be possible to carve words on it?" "Ha, since it is impervious to all powers, then why was it shattered?" Small Tower countered. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Even if it's the primordial stone, there is a limit to the attacks it can absorb. When the power exceeds this limit, even the primordial stone can only shatter. You're worth teaching." Small Tower flaunted its seniority. However, the Black Tower had existed for who knew how many tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of millions of years, so it indeed had the right to flaunt its seniority. Though the primordial stone isn't a treasure, because of its very long history, many people use it as a monument to praise the merits of their ancestors. It can also be considered a relatively rare item, Small Tower continued. Ling Han sighed, and said, "Though I feel good about myself, I'm not arrogant enough to build a monument for myself. This thing, I'll use it as a shield." "Oh, right. What kind of power is needed to break it?" "The power of creation can break it," Small Tower answered. Ling Han glared, and said, "Then wouldn't it be the Genesis tier?" Small Tower did not answer, as if it felt that this question was very idiotic. It was completely too lazy to answer. "Then this shield is really useful. Unfortunately, it's too small." Ling Han appeared to be somewhat satisfied, because the function of this stone slab was to completely absorb attacks, and if used well, it could bring out a miraculous effect. But because it was too small, if it encountered a powerful demonic beast that directly used its hill-like body to ram over, it would be useless, and completely unable to protect it. If it encountered an elite that punched out, or even turned into a star, it would also be completely ineffective. "It depends on how I use it." Ling Han exited the Black Tower, and instantly, a terrifying water pressure attacked. He tried to use the primordial stone, and it was really effective. Wherever it was placed, the pressure would completely disappear. Unfortunately, it could only protect an area the size of a palm. Ling Han simply used it as a heart-protecting mirror. The heart, brain, and dantian, these were the three biggest vital points of a cultivator. The first two could be fatal, and the dantian was the source of power. If it was destroyed, then it was equivalent to being a cripple. He began to float towards the surface of the sea. Because of the powerful gravity, buoyancy seemed to have completely disappeared, and the speed at which he floated was very slow. The waves surged, and suddenly a huge demonic beast appeared in front of him. It was a giant crocodile with 6 legs. It was more than 900 meters long, and its whole body was covered with scales that were even larger than a manhole cover. Merely its tail was more than 300 meters long. Ling Han could sense it, and that was because its 2 eyes were shining like fireballs. At the same time, he also felt an indescribable pressure. Sun Moon Tear, the giant crocodile, also discovered him, and immediately swung its tail. Its figure sped up, and it opened its mouth to bite at him. Ling Han did not have the slightest bit of hope, and directly hid into the Black Tower. If this giant mouth bit down, it was not something that the primordial stone could block at all. Perhaps only his heart could remain intact, and the other parts of his body would become rotten flesh. With a crack, the giant crocodile closed its mouth, but there was a hint of confusion in its eyes because it did not bite anything at all. The sea surged. This time, the Black Tower was not swallowed by the giant crocodile because there was a huge gap between its teeth. The Black Tower had long since surged out with the water, and was instantly pushed several hundred meters away by the strong current. The Sun Moon Tear was really too powerful. Ling Han sighed in the Black Tower. If he encountered an existence in the consummate level of the Mountain River Tier, even if he was no match for them, he would still be able to put up a fight. For example, he had been surrounded by 5 demonic beasts in the consummate level of the Mountain River Tier, yet he had only spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. However, he believed that if he was bitten by this giant crocodile, he would be crushed into a bloody pulp in an instant. The difference in strength was just too great. The crocodile was obviously frowning. At its level, its intelligence was completely developed. It was no different from a human. It was just that it didn't want to transform into a human in the deep sea. Otherwise, ordinary people wouldn't be able to tell the difference between it and a human. A mere Mountain River Tier cultivator actually managed to dodge its bite. Strange thought. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.